Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of Minecraft and Absolute Chaos. I'm building in our Minecraft world today while we dive into some stories that'll make your blood boil and then simmer down into pure satisfaction. So grab your headphones, get comfortable, and let's watch someone's entire world collapse in real time. Alright, before we dive in, I've gotta say it. Huge shout out to everyone who's been commenting and showing love on the channel. You guys are the reason this keeps going, and I appreciate you more than you realize. So, our first story begins with a guy who thought he was clever enough to maintain two completely separate relationships for 8 months. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. Let's get into it. I thought I was being careful. I really did. For 8 months, I managed to keep two completely separate lives running in parallel, and honestly, I convinced myself I was some kind of genius. Emma thought I was this devoted, single guy who spent his weekends with her, completely focused on building our future together. Sarah believed I was a dedicated professional whose job required constant travel, which explained why I was only around a few days a week. The lies came easy at first, too easy. I created fake social media accounts to keep the timeline straight. I rented a second apartment across town, a tiny studio that cost me half my paycheck, but was necessary to maintain the illusion. I had two phone calendars, two sets of friends I kept carefully separated, two completely different versions of myself that I'd slip into, depending on which door I was walking through. Emma got the romantic, attentive boyfriend who cooked dinner and talked about future plans. Sarah got the ambitious career guy who squeezed in quality time between business trips. The logistics were exhausting. I'm talking spreadsheets to track which restaurant I'd taken, which girl to, notes in my phone about conversation topics so I wouldn't repeat stories, even different cologne for different days. I told Emma I was allergic to social media, which is why she couldn't tag me in anything. I told Sarah my job required privacy, so no public photos. Every lie required three more lies to support it, and I was building this massive house of cards that I somehow thought would just stand there forever. Looking back, I don't even know what I was thinking. What was the end game here? Marriage to both of them? Moving to different cities? The truth is, I wasn't thinking. I was just riding this weird high of getting away with it, of being wanted by two amazing women, of feeling like I'd cracked some code that other people were too honest or too stupid to figure out. Then came my birthday. I should have seen it coming, but I'd gotten so comfortable in my delusion that I'd actually forgotten the most basic fact about my life. My sister loves throwing surprise parties. She'd been planning this for weeks, apparently, and had reached out to everyone in my life. Everyone. Emma showed up first. I walked into my sister's house, and there she was in the living room, holding this gorgeous homemade cake she'd spent all day baking. It was chocolate with vanilla frosting, my favorite, decorated with little fondant figures that represented inside jokes between us. My heart stopped, but I plastered on a smile and hugged her, my mind already racing through exit strategies. Maybe I could get her out of here before anyone else arrived. Maybe I could fake a family emergency. Maybe I could just spontaneously combust and save everyone the trouble. I was trying to steer Emma toward the door with some excuse about needing to grab something from my car when I heard my sister squeal from the hallway. Sarah had just arrived. She was walking through the front door with a bottle of scotch, the expensive kind I'd mentioned loving exactly once during a conversation 3 months ago. She'd remembered. She'd driven across town to get it. And now she was standing in the same room as Emma, both of them holding thoughtful gifts, both of them smiling at me like I was the center of their world. The room didn't just go quiet, it went silent in that specific way where you can hear someone's watch ticking from across the room. My sister looked confused. My parents looked between the two women with these slowly dawning expressions of horror. A few of my friends who knew about Emma were staring at Sarah like she'd materialized out of thin air, and I just stood there, frozen, watching my two separate lives collide in real time. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Trust me, the train wreck only gets worse from here. Now, where was I? Oh, right. Watching my entire world collapse as two women I'd been lying to stood face to face at my birthday party. Emma spoke first. She looked at Sarah, then at me, then back at Sarah. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm his girlfriend. Her voice was steady, but there was already a question in it, a tiny crack of uncertainty that made my stomach drop. Sarah's smile didn't waver, but something changed behind her eyes. Oh, that's funny. I'm Sarah. I'm also his girlfriend. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. They didn't scream. They didn't cry. They just started talking to each other with this eerie calm, comparing notes like detectives piecing together a case. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Emma a text I'd sent that morning about missing her while I was away on business. Emma showed Sarah a photo of us from that exact same morning, having breakfast at a cafe downtown. They went through everything. The restaurants, yeah, I'd taken them to the same places, used the same lines, ordered the same wine because apparently I'm not just a liar but an uncreative one. The excuse texts were identical, word for word sometimes. I'd told both of them I loved how they laughed, how they made me want to be better, how I'd never felt this way before. Even the pet names, I'd called them both Sunshine, because apparently my brain couldn't even bother to come up with distinct terms of endearment for the two different women I was deceiving. My family just watched. My sister had tears running down her face, not sad tears, angry ones. My mum kept shaking her head like she was trying to physically reject what she was witnessing. My dad looked at me like I was a stranger. Then came the breaking point. Emma turned to me with this look of complete devastation. 8 months, she said. I introduced you to my parents. I turned down a job in another city because of you. I told my friends you were the one. Her voice broke on that last word, and I felt something inside me shatter. Sarah was quieter, but somehow more cutting. I defended you to my family when they said you were never around. I planned my entire schedule around the few days you said you could see me. I thought you were worth waiting for. They both dumped me right there. Emma took her cake and threw it in the trash on her way out. Sarah set the scotch on the table and told me I didn't deserve it, that I didn't deserve anything good. Then they left together, and I watched through the window as they stood in the driveway still talking, probably realizing they actually liked each other more than they'd ever liked me. The party cleared out fast after that. Friends made awkward excuses and disappeared. Family members couldn't even look at me. My sister told me to leave her house and not to contact her until I figured out what was wrong with me. My parents followed me outside, and my dad just said, "I don't know who you are right now." The fallout was immediate and total. Emma and Sarah apparently stayed in touch. They became friends, bonded over the shared experience of dating the same lying piece of garbage. They posted about it vaguely on social media, nothing that named me specifically, but enough that mutual friends figured it out. People started choosing sides, and nobody chose mine. My friend group fractured. Half of them knew Emma and cut me off entirely. The other half just slowly stopped responding to messages. I'd go to our regular bar and see people I'd known for years deliberately look away. One of my buddies told me straight up that what I did was unforgivable, that he had sisters, and if someone did that to them, he'd lose his mind. My sister didn't speak to me for months. Every family dinner was this awkward nightmare where my parents would mention her, and I'd be reminded that she wanted nothing to do with me. When she finally agreed to meet me for coffee, she spent the whole time telling me how disappointed she was, how she'd looked up to me growing up, and now she couldn't understand how I'd become this person. Work became unbearable too because apparently one of Sarah's friends worked in my building. Word spread. I'd hear whispers when I walked into the break room. My reputation was destroyed in every circle that mattered. I lost both women, obviously, but that was almost the least of it. I lost my sister's trust. I lost my friends. I lost the respect of my parents. I lost my reputation, and I lost any shred of self-respect I had left because every time I look in the mirror, I see the guy who thought he was clever enough to juggle two lives and ended up with nothing. The worst part? They both deserve better. Emma with her homemade cake and her plans for our future. Sarah with her patience and her thoughtful gifts. They deserve someone who was actually present, actually honest, actually capable of commitment. Instead, they got me, and I wasted 8 months of their lives building a lie that was always going to explode. I'm single now, obviously. And I'm going to be for a long time because I clearly have no business being in anyone's life until I figure out why I thought any of this was okay. Some days I think about reaching out to apologize, but what would I even say? Sorry I treated you like props in my ego trip. Sorry I was too cowardly to just be honest. There's no apology big enough for what I did. So yeah, that's how my double life exploded. Birthday party, 2 girlfriends, 1 massive implosion. I'd say I learned my lesson, but honestly, I'm still unpacking what kind of person does something like this in the first place. All I know is that watching those two women walk away together while my family looked at me like a stranger is an image that's burned into my brain forever, and I deserve every second of it. Speaking of secrets destroying everything at the worst possible moment, wait until you hear what happened when someone sneaking around got caught on camera. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I need to tell you about the time I got absolutely destroyed by a rumor that started because I was trying to do something nice for my parents. This whole thing spiraled so fast, I didn't even have time to defend myself before my entire life was turned inside out. So here's the setup. My parents were coming up on their 30th wedding anniversary, and I wanted to do something special for them. They'd been through a lot over the years: health scares, financial stress, the usual life chaos, and they deserved a night where they felt celebrated. I decided to throw them a surprise party at this nice hotel downtown that had event rooms you could rent. Nothing crazy expensive, but nice enough that it felt like an occasion. I booked the room, invited family and friends, ordered catering, the whole thing. I was really proud of myself for pulling it together. The party was on a Saturday evening, but I knew I'd need time to set everything up. Decorations, table arrangements, a slideshow of old photos I'd been working on for weeks. So I booked the event room starting Friday night and planned to arrive early Saturday morning to get everything ready before guests showed up at 6 that evening. I'm talking balloons, streamers, floral centerpieces, a banner I'd custom ordered. This wasn't a half-effort situation. I got to the hotel around 5:45 in the morning. Yes, that's early. Yes, I'm aware of how that looks in hindsight, but at the time, I just wanted to make sure everything was perfect. I had my car packed with all the supplies, and I made probably 6 or 7 trips back and forth from the parking lot to the event room, hauling boxes of decorations, bags of supplies, and this absolutely massive photo collage board I'd put together. By the time I finished the last trip, it was around 6:15 in the morning, and I was exhausted but satisfied. I locked up the event room, headed back to my car, and went home to shower and get ready for the actual party. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Turns out, one of my neighbors from my apartment complex, a woman named Diane who I'd maybe spoken to 3 times in the 2 years I'd lived there, was also at that hotel that morning. I have no idea why. Maybe she had an early breakfast meeting. Maybe she was leaving from her own questionable situation. I genuinely don't know, and I don't care. But she saw me. She saw me walking out of the hotel at 6 in the morning, looking tired and a little disheveled because I'd just spent over an hour hauling decorations, and she immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. Diane decided, with zero evidence and apparently zero common sense, that I was sneaking out after spending the night with someone who wasn't my boyfriend. An affair. That's what she landed on. And instead of, I don't know, minding her own business or even asking me about it, she decided to tell everyone she knew. Within 2 days, the rumor had spread like wildfire, and I mean everyone knew. People in my apartment building who I'd never even made eye contact with suddenly had opinions about my personal life. Someone left a note on my door that just said "Home Wrecker" in all caps. My gym, where I went 3 times a week and knew half the front desk staff by name, became this minefield of whispers and side eyes. I'd walk in and conversations would just stop. People would look at me and then look away really fast like they'd been caught. Here's where it gets absurd. Diane didn't just tell random neighbors and gym acquaintances. She somehow got in touch with people from my workplace. I still don't know how she managed that. Maybe she found me on LinkedIn and started messaging coworkers. Maybe she knew someone who knew someone. But within 48 hours of her seeing me at that hotel, my boss called me into her office for what she described as a culture fit conversation. I remember sitting in that chair, completely blindsided, while my boss awkwardly danced around the actual accusation. She kept saying things like, "We've heard some concerns about your personal conduct," and "We want to make sure your outside activities aren't affecting your professional reputation." I had no idea what she was talking about at first. I thought maybe I'd missed a deadline or sent a weird email. Then she finally said someone had reached out with concerns about me being seen in a compromising situation at a hotel, and the company wanted to address it before it became a larger issue. I was mortified. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I explained the entire situation, the anniversary party, the early morning setup, all of it. My boss seemed to believe me, but the damage was already done. The fact that the conversation even happened meant people in my office knew something had been said. The rumor had officially entered my workplace. Then came the breaking point. My boyfriend, who I'd been with for 3 years and who I genuinely thought I'd marry someday, started getting messages, concerned messages from people who barely knew him, telling him they were worried about me, that they'd heard things, that he deserved to know the truth. He came home one night and just put his phone on the kitchen counter and asked me point blank if I was cheating on him. I've never felt so betrayed and helpless at the same time. This man knew me. He knew I'd been planning this party for my parents for months. He'd helped me pick out decorations. And yet, because enough people had whispered in his ear, he was standing in our kitchen questioning whether I'd been faithful. I showed him everything: the event booking confirmation, the receipts for decorations and catering, photos I'd taken of the decorated room before the party even started. I even called the hotel and asked if they could send over security footage from that morning, showing me carrying boxes back and forth like some kind of deranged pack mule. The hotel was actually really helpful. They sent over time-stamped footage of me in the parking lot, in the lobby, going in and out of the event room. It was all there. Proof. Undeniable evidence that I was doing exactly what I said I was doing. But that wasn't even the worst part. Even with all that evidence, the damage was already done. My boyfriend believed me, eventually, but he was different after that. There was this distance between us that hadn't been there before. Every time I left the house, I could feel him wondering where I was actually going. Every time my phone buzzed, he'd glance at it. The trust had been cracked, and no amount of security footage was going to fully repair it. It's like watching someone's reputation get shredded in real time and being completely powerless to stop it. People at my apartment building still whispered. I'd walk to my car and feel eyes on me from windows. Someone started a group chat, I'm not even kidding, where they discussed my alleged affair like it was some kind of soap opera. A friend of a friend showed me screenshots. People were making up details, saying they'd seen me with different men, speculating about how long it had been going on. It was complete fiction, but it didn't matter. The story had taken on a life of its own. My gym became unbearable. I'd get on a treadmill and the person next to me would suddenly decide they needed to move to a different machine. The locker room, which used to be where I'd have friendly small talk with other regulars, became this hostile, silent space. One woman, someone I'd chatted with dozens of times, looked me dead in the eye and said, I hope you're proud of yourself, before walking away. I genuinely considered just cancelling my membership and working out at home, but I was so angry that I refused to let Diane and her gossip brigade win. Work became a minefield too. My boss believed me, and HR technically closed the matter, but I could tell some of my coworkers had their doubts. There were these little moments. Someone would make a joke about hotel rooms and then glance at me. A conversation about relationships would get awkward when I walked into the break room. I wasn't imagining it. The rumor had poisoned the way people saw me, and there was nothing I could do to fully erase it. My relationship with my boyfriend deteriorated slowly, and then all at once. We tried. We really did. But every argument, no matter what it was actually about, eventually circled back to trust. He'd say he believed me, but then he'd make some comment about how he never really knew what I was doing. I'd get defensive. He'd shut down. We were stuck in this loop, and I could feel us both getting exhausted by it. After about 3 months of living in this nightmare, I made a decision. I was moving. I couldn't stay in that apartment building where people thought they knew my business. I couldn't keep going to that gym where I was treated like a pariah. I needed a clean slate, even though it felt like Diane was winning. I found a new apartment across town, gave notice at my old place, and switched to a gym near my office. I didn't tell anyone except my boyfriend and my parents where I was moving. I just wanted to disappear from the radar of everyone who'd been so eager to believe the worst about me. The breakup happened 2 weeks after I moved. My boyfriend said he couldn't do it anymore, that the trust was gone, and he didn't see how we'd get it back. I didn't fight him. I was too tired, too emotionally drained from months of defending myself against a lie that had somehow become the truth in everyone else's eyes. I never confronted Diane directly. Part of me wanted to show her the security footage and the receipts and ask her how it felt to destroy someone's life over an assumption. But I knew it wouldn't matter. People like her don't apologize, they don't take responsibility, they just move on to the next piece of gossip, the next person to tear down. The party itself, the thing that started all of this, was beautiful. My parents were so happy and surprised. They had no idea what I'd gone through that morning to make it happen, and I never told them. I didn't want to ruin their night with the knowledge that their anniversary party had somehow become the catalyst for my life falling apart. Looking back, I think the worst part wasn't even the rumor itself. It was how easily people believed it. How quickly strangers and acquaintances were willing to assume the worst about me without asking a single question. I wasn't a person to them. I was just a story, a piece of gossip to share over coffee or in a group chat. I've been in my new apartment for about 6 months now. I have a new gym routine. I'm doing okay at work. My parents still talk about how wonderful their anniversary party was. And I'm single, which is fine for now. I'm rebuilding, slowly. But I still think about Diane sometimes. I wonder if she ever found out the truth. I wonder if she felt even a flicker of guilt when she realized she'd been wrong. Probably not. People like her rarely do. That hotel nightmare was brutal, but imagine discovering that someone you trusted was secretly manipulating your entire reality behind closed doors. I'm one of those people who deep cleans when I'm stressed. It's therapeutic, you know. So there I was on a random Wednesday afternoon, moving furniture around, dusting behind picture frames, getting into all those spots you normally ignore. Our bedroom mirror is one of those big vintage ones Marcus and I found at an estate sale, the kind with an ornate wooden frame that probably weighs more than I do. I was wiping down the back of it when I saw it. A tiny red light, barely visible, blinking slowly in the shadows. At first I thought maybe it was a reflection from something else, maybe the smoke detector in the hallway, or some electronic I'd forgotten about. But when I leaned closer, my stomach dropped. There was a small device wedged into the decorative carving of the frame, positioned at an angle that pointed directly at our bed. I'm talking perfectly aimed, like someone had calculated the exact spot for maximum coverage. My hands started shaking as I carefully pulled it out. It was a camera, a real, actual hidden camera in our bedroom. I stood there holding this thing, and my brain just started racing through every possible explanation. Was this some kind of prank? Did Marcus set this up for some reason I couldn't understand? We'd been together for 3 years. We lived together. We trusted each other. This didn't make sense. I felt sick, like physically nauseous, because either my partner had been recording us without my knowledge or someone else had, and I honestly didn't know which option was worse. When Marcus got home from work that evening, I was sitting on the couch with the camera on the coffee table in front of me. I hadn't moved in 2 hours. He walked in, saw my face, saw the camera, and I watched all the color drain from his skin. He asked what it was. I said, "You tell me." And the look of genuine confusion and horror on his face was so visceral that I knew immediately he had no idea it was there. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands, and just kept saying, "What the hell? What the hell?" over and over. We called the police right there. No hesitation, no. Let's think about this first. Marcus was furious and terrified, and I was just numb. 2 officers showed up within 20 minutes and treated it exactly as seriously as it felt. They bagged the camera as evidence and told us they'd need to analyze it, trace where it was sending data, the whole forensic process. They asked if anyone else had access to our apartment. Marcus mentioned his brother Kyle had a spare key for emergencies, but immediately said there's no way Kyle wouldn't do something like this. But here's where it gets absurd. The officers asked when Kyle had last been over. Marcus said maybe 3 weeks ago, when he watered our plants while we were visiting my parents for the weekend. The detective made a note of that and said they'd be in touch. I remember thinking this has to be a break-in, some stranger, some horrible random crime. The idea that it could be someone we knew felt impossible. It took the police 4 days to trace the IP address. 4 days of me refusing to sleep in our bedroom, of checking every corner of our apartment with a flashlight, of Marcus barely eating because he felt so guilty even though he'd done nothing wrong. When the detective called and asked us to come down to the station, we knew they'd found something. What we didn't know was that it was going to destroy everything we thought we understood about the people in our lives. Kyle had installed the camera. Kyle, Marcus's younger brother, the guy who'd been at our wedding, who came over for dinner once a month, who I'd always thought was a little awkward but harmless. The detective told us the camera had been streaming to an encrypted server for 3 months, 3 entire months of footage, and when they accessed that server with a warrant, they found cameras, plural, not just the bedroom. There was one in our bathroom, hidden in a vent, one in the living room, tucked behind a book on the shelf. Kyle had been watching us for months, The detective said Kyle had created folders. Organized folders with dates and labels. He had recordings of intimate moments, private conversations, everything. They found communications where he'd shared some of the footage in online forums. I had to leave the room. I literally could not process what I was hearing. This person who I'd hugged at family gatherings, who I'd made coffee for in my kitchen, had been violating my privacy in the most disgusting way imaginable. Marcus lost it, completely lost it. He tried to leave the station immediately to confront Kyle, and the officers had to physically stop him. They explained that Kyle was already being picked up, that showing up at his place would only make things worse legally. But Marcus was beyond reason. His brother had betrayed both of us in a way that felt almost incomprehensible. The detective asked if I wanted to press charges. I said absolutely, without hesitation. They told us Kyle would likely face multiple felony charges, including invasion of privacy, wiretapping, and distribution of intimate images. When they arrested Kyle, he apparently confessed almost immediately. Didn't even try to deny it. Told the officers he'd been obsessed with me since the first time Marcus introduced us, that he'd convinced himself he was in love, that watching made him feel close to me. The entitlement of that statement alone makes me want to scream. He talked about it like it was some romantic tragedy, instead of a violation and a crime. Like he was the victim of his own feelings instead of the perpetrator of something genuinely evil. Then came the breaking point. Marcus saw Kyle at the arraignment. I told him not to go, told him to let the lawyers handle it, but he needed to face him. And the moment Kyle walked into that courtroom, Marcus lunged at him, took 3 bailiffs to pull him off. Kyle didn't even fight back, just curled up and let Marcus get a few hits in before they separated them. Marcus got charged with assault, though the judge was lenient given the circumstances, and it got knocked down to a fine and anger management classes. Kyle's lawyer tried to use the attack to paint Marcus as violent and unstable, but the prosecution shut that down fast. The evidence against Kyle was overwhelming. Kyle took a plea deal, didn't even go to trial. He's facing 3 years in prison for the felony charges, and he'll be on the sex offender registry for life. 3 years feels like nothing for what he did. But our lawyer said it was actually a decent outcome, given how backlogged the courts are. He'll be out in less than that with good behavior, probably. Meanwhile, I'm in therapy twice a week trying to feel safe in my own home. Marcus and I are still together, but it's been hard. Really hard. He blames himself even though rationally he knows he couldn't have known. His whole family is fractured now. His parents are devastated, torn between their sons. Family dinners don't happen anymore. Holidays are separate events. Marcus's mum cried on the phone for an hour trying to apologize to me, like she was somehow responsible for her adult son's choices. I see cameras everywhere now. Every smoke detector, every TV, every mirror. I check hotel rooms obsessively. I cover my laptop camera even though I know that's not how any of this worked. The violation isn't just about what Kyle did. It's about the fact that I'll never feel completely private again. Every room in our apartment has been scrubbed, redecorated, sometimes completely rearranged, just so it doesn't feel like the same space he was watching. We moved 6 months after everything came out. New apartment, new locks, no spare keys for anyone. I don't care if the building burns down. No one else is getting access. The worst part is knowing the footage existed at all. Even though the police seized the servers and confirmed everything was deleted, I know it was out there. Strangers on the internet saw private moments that were never meant for anyone but Marcus and me. That knowledge doesn't go away. It sits in the back of my mind during every intimate moment, every vulnerable conversation. I'm haunted by something I can't even see anymore. This isn't something you just get over. People ask if we've moved on, and I don't even know how to answer that. We're functioning. We're in therapy. We're trying. But the trust that got broken wasn't just between us and Kyle. It was trust in safety, in privacy, in the idea that your home is actually yours. Marcus and I are rebuilding, but we're rebuilding in a world that feels fundamentally less secure than it did before. Every time I walk into a room now, there's this split second where I wonder if I'm being watched, and I hate that Kyle gave me that feeling. I hate that he took something from me I can never fully get back. I had keys to my brother Tyler's house because he traveled for work constantly, and someone needed to water his plants and grab his mail. We had that kind of relationship, or at least I thought we did. The kind where you trust someone with your spare key because they're family, and family means something. I'd stop by maybe once a week, water the ferns he kept insisting on buying, even though he was never home to care for them, and make sure his place didn't look abandoned. Easy favor for my older brother. No big deal. It was a Tuesday morning around 10. Tyler was supposed to be in Denver for a conference, gone for the whole week. I let myself in through the front door and immediately heard something from upstairs. Footsteps, movement, the sound of someone definitely being in the house when no one should be there. My first thought was break-in. My second thought was I should probably call the police. My third thought, the one I actually acted on like an idiot, was to grab the baseball bat Tyler kept by the door and go investigate myself. I crept up the stairs as quietly as I could, heart pounding, bat raised, fully prepared to confront some stranger ransacking my brother's bedroom. I pushed open his bedroom door and my brain just stopped working for a second, because what I saw made absolutely no sense. Rachel, my ex-girlfriend Rachel, was in Tyler's bed, wearing one of his shirts. Just sitting there with her coffee like this was completely normal. We stared at each other. I'm still holding this baseball bat like a complete moron. She's frozen with her mug halfway to her mouth. And then Tyler walked out of the bathroom in a towel, and the entire picture came together in the most gut-wrenching way possible. My brother and my ex, in his bed, together. The bat hit the floor. I think I said something. I honestly don't remember what. Tyler started talking immediately. This rush of words about how he could explain, how this wasn't what it looked like, except it was exactly what it looked like. Rachel set down her coffee and pulled the blanket up higher like modesty mattered at this point. They'd been dating for 5 months. 5 months. They started seeing each other just 2 months after Rachel and I broke up. A breakup that had absolutely destroyed me. I'd spent 3 weeks sleeping on Tyler's couch because I couldn't stand being in my own apartment, surrounded by reminders of her. Tyler had been there for all of it. He'd listened to me talk through the pain, told me I'd get through it, helped me box up her stuff, and apparently the whole time he was already interested in her. Already moving in on my ex before I'd even begun to process the loss. Rachel tried to explain first. She said they ran into each other at a coffee shop, started talking, realized they had a connection. She used the word connection like that made it okay. Like having a connection with your ex-boyfriend's brother was some kind of romantic destiny instead of a massive betrayal. She said they fell in love and couldn't help it. Like love was this force that removed all personal responsibility and decision-making capability. Tyler's explanation was somehow worse. He said he'd wanted to tell me but was waiting for the right time. The right time. As if there was ever going to be a right time to say, hey, remember your ex-girlfriend who broke your heart? Yeah, I'm dating her now. He said he knew it looked bad, but that what he and Rachel had was real, and he hoped I could understand eventually. Understand, like this was some minor disagreement about where to eat dinner instead of a fundamental destruction of trust. I asked him when exactly he thought the right time would be. Their 1-year anniversary, their engagement, their wedding. Was I supposed to just show up one day and find out I had a new sister-in-law who used to be my girlfriend? Tyler didn't have an answer for that. He just stood there dripping on his hardwood floor, looking guilty, but not guilty enough to actually do anything different. I threw the keys at him, literally threw them across the room, told him to water his own plants from now on, told Rachel she'd finally managed to find someone who apparently deserved her. Then I left before either of them could say anything else, because I was about 5 seconds away from completely losing it, and I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. I told my parents that same day because I knew Tyler would try to spin it, try to make it sound less awful than it was. My mom cried. My dad went silent in that way he does when he's too angry to speak. They called Tyler and demanded he come over for a family meeting. He brought Rachel, which was somehow even more insulting, like she was already part of the family, and we all just needed to adjust our expectations. My parents tried to mediate. They really did. My mom kept saying we're family. We have to work through this. My dad was less diplomatic. He told Tyler point blank that what he'd done was a betrayal, and that bringing Rachel into our family was asking everyone to participate in that betrayal. Tyler got defensive, said he was an adult, and could date whoever he wanted. Rachel sat there looking uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to actually leave. I gave Tyler an ultimatum, and I meant it. Choose her or choose family. I wasn't going to sit at Thanksgiving dinner making small talk with my ex-girlfriend. I wasn't going to pretend this was normal or acceptable just because time had passed. If he wanted Rachel, fine, but he couldn't have both. He couldn't keep his relationship and expect the rest of us to just smile and nod and act like nothing had changed. Tyler chose Rachel. He said he loved her and that he wasn't going to end a meaningful relationship because I couldn't handle it. Those were his actual words, because I couldn't handle it. Like my reaction was the problem, like I was being unreasonable for not wanting my brother to date the woman who'd broken my heart. The entitlement of that statement still makes my blood boil. Our parents were devastated. My mum calls me every week crying, asking if there's any way to fix this. My dad hasn't spoken to Tyler in 2 months, won't take his calls, doesn't respond to texts. I know my mum talks to Tyler separately, tries to maintain some kind of relationship, but she doesn't mention it around my dad or me anymore. Family gatherings are now split into 2 separate events. My parents host one dinner with me. A few days later, they do another one with Tyler and Rachel. Holidays are divided, birthdays are complicated. My mum tries to see both her sons but ends up exhausted and sad because her family is fractured and there's no good solution. Extended family has taken sides. Some relatives think Tyler and Rachel should be allowed to be happy, that love is love or whatever. Others think what Tyler did was unforgivable. Family group chats have splintered. Cousins who used to organize big reunions don't bother anymore because half the family won't come if Tyler and Rachel are there and vice versa. The worst part is how Tyler acts like he's the victim in all this. He posts on social media about choosing love over judgment, about surrounding yourself with people who support your happiness. Rachel comments with heart emojis. It's performative and gross and feels like they're trying to rewrite history. Like they're the brave couple overcoming adversity instead of 2 people who went behind my back and blew up a family. I ran into them once at a grocery store. Pure accident, wrong place, wrong time. Rachel tried to smile at me. Tyler nodded like we were casual acquaintances. I turned around and left my cart in the middle of the aisle because I couldn't do it. Couldn't pretend. Couldn't make small talk. Couldn't act like seeing them together didn't make me feel physically ill. Friends tell me I should forgive him, that holding grudges only hurts me. But this isn't a grudge. This is a boundary. Tyler made a choice knowing exactly what it would cost, and I'm allowed to decide I don't want him in my life after that. Forgiveness isn't mandatory just because we share DNA. My mom asked me recently if I'd consider talking to Tyler at her birthday next year. She'll be 60 and she wants both her sons there. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly I don't know. The betrayal is still too fresh. The image of Rachel in his bed, wearing his shirt, comfortable in his space, it's burned into my brain. That's not something that fades just because time passes. Tyler got what he wanted. He has Rachel. They're apparently very happy together based on the social media posts I can't seem to stop myself from occasionally checking. But he lost his brother, his relationship with our dad, and the easy comfort of family gatherings where everyone actually wants to be in the same room. I hope she was worth it. I genuinely do. Because he paid for that relationship with everything else. Family betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes the person who destroys your trust is hiding behind a professional smile and a keyboard. Jennifer and I started at the company around the same time, about 4 years ago. We weren't friends exactly, but we were friendly enough. We'd grab coffee occasionally, complain about deadlines, do the normal coworker thing. When our manager announced she was leaving and the senior account manager position opened up, I knew I wanted it. I'd been working towards something like this for years. What I didn't know was that Jennifer wanted it just as badly, and she was willing to do absolutely anything to get it. The first sign something was off came about 2 weeks after we both submitted our applications for the promotion. My supervisor pulled me aside after a meeting and asked if everything was okay with my workload. I said, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't it be? She looked uncomfortable and mentioned she'd received some concerns about missed deadlines on my end. I was confused because I hadn't missed any deadlines. I'm obsessive about that stuff. I keep spreadsheets. I set 3 reminders for everything. Missing deadlines isn't something I do. I asked which project she was referring to, and she said she'd have to check her notes and get back to me. It felt weird, but I figured maybe there was some miscommunication somewhere. I went back to my desk and didn't think much more about it. That was my mistake. I should have pushed harder right then. Over the next 3 weeks, things escalated fast. My supervisor started CCing me on emails with pointed reminders about company policy. HR sent me a link to the Professional Conduct Handbook with a note saying I should review the sections on workplace communication. I was getting these vague warnings about my behavior, but nobody would tell me specifically what I'd done wrong. Every time I asked for examples, I got brushed off with something about reviewing the concerns and following up later. Then I got the email. HR wanted to meet with me first thing Monday morning, bring any relevant documentation regarding my conduct over the past month. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a casual check-in. This was serious. I spent the entire weekend going through every email I'd sent, every Slack message, every project update, trying to figure out what could possibly warrant an HR meeting. I found nothing. My communications were professional. My work was solid. I had no idea what was happening. Monday morning, I walked into that conference room and found my supervisor, an HR rep, and a stack of printed documents about 2 inches thick sitting on the table. The HR rep, Linda, gave me this sympathetic look that made everything worse. She slid the stack toward me and said they'd received multiple reports of concerning behavior, and they needed to discuss it. I started reading through the documents, and I felt like I was losing my mind. There were emails I'd supposedly sent with snarky, unprofessional comments about clients, Slack messages where I'd apparently complained about company leadership and made inappropriate jokes, screenshots of me missing deadlines, sending work late, violating protocols I didn't even know existed. Page after page of evidence that painted me as this incompetent, unprofessional disaster of an employee. And all of it had come from Jennifer. Every single report, every piece of documentation, every screenshot. She'd been building a case against me for weeks. I sat there staring at these papers, and I genuinely didn't know what to say. The messages looked real. The emails had my name on them, but I knew I hadn't sent them. I knew I hadn't said those things. I tried to explain that, tried to tell Linda and my supervisor that something was wrong here, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. The evidence was right there in front of them. Why would Jennifer fabricate all of this? That's when I noticed something. One of the screenshots Jennifer had submitted showed a Slack conversation where I'd allegedly made a rude comment about a client, but in the top corner of the screenshot, you could see her browser tabs, and one of those tabs was a website for editing screenshots. Another tab was open to a tutorial on how to alter message timestamps. Jennifer had forgotten to crop the image properly. The evidence of her fraud was sitting right there in her own documentation. I pointed it out to Linda, my hands shaking. She looked closer, then grabbed another screenshot from the pile. Same thing, browser tabs visible. One was open to a fake email generator. Another showed a Slack plugin for creating fake message histories. Jennifer had been sloppy, and it was all right there. Linda's expression changed completely. She excused herself, took the documents, and said she needed to make some calls. My supervisor just sat there looking stunned. I was told to go back to my desk and wait for further instruction. The rest of the day was agony. I had no idea what was happening or what would come next. IT forensics got involved. They pulled metadata from all the screenshots Jennifer had submitted. They checked our actual Slack history, our real email records, everything. And here's where it gets absurd. Not only had Jennifer edited existing messages, she'd created entirely fake accounts to send inappropriate emails that looked like they came from me. She'd altered timestamps to make it seem like I was sending work late. She'd even fabricated entire conversation threads that never existed. The level of effort she'd put into this was honestly impressive in the most disturbing way possible. She'd spent weeks, maybe months, carefully constructing this elaborate frame job, and she would have gotten away with it if she'd just remembered to crop her screenshots. 2 days later, Jennifer was called into HR. I wasn't in that meeting, but I heard about it from multiple people who watched her get escorted out of the building by security that same afternoon. She was fired on the spot. No 2 weeks' notice. No goodbye email to the team. Just gone. Her desk was cleared out by end of day, and IT revoked all her access immediately. But that wasn't even the worst part. The company decided to pursue legal action against her for fraud and defamation. Jennifer had used company resources to create false documentation with the intent to damage my professional reputation and steal a promotion that should have been decided on merit. The legal team told me they were treating it seriously because if they didn't, it set a precedent that this kind of behavior was acceptable. I got the promotion 3 weeks later. Along with it came Jennifer's client accounts, which was ironic considering she'd tried so hard to prove I was incompetent. My supervisor apologized repeatedly for not catching the discrepancies sooner. HR implemented new policies about reviewing evidence before acting on reports. The whole thing became this case study in what not to do. Jennifer started emailing me about a month after she was fired. The first one was almost apologetic, saying she'd made a mistake and asking if I could talk to the company on her behalf. I deleted it. The second email was more desperate. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that she'd never meant for things to go this far, that surely I could see she was just stressed about the promotion and made some bad choices. The third email accused me of ruining her life, said I should have just let it go, that getting her fired and sued was overkill, that I was vindictive and cruel. The cognitive dissonance was genuinely astounding. She'd tried to destroy my career with fabricated evidence, and somehow I was the bad guy for not covering for her after she got caught. I forwarded every single email directly to our legal team. They told me to document any contact she attempted, and I was more than happy to comply. Each message she sent just added to the case against her. Her lawyer eventually told her to stop contacting me, but by then she'd sent maybe a dozen emails, each one more unhinged than the last. The legal case is still ongoing. Last I heard, Jennifer's trying to settle because going to trial would mean all the fabricated evidence gets presented in court, and her lawyer apparently advised her that's not a fight she can win. The company wants a financial settlement plus a formal admission of wrongdoing. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm doing well now. The promotion came with a significant raise and better projects. My team actually respects my work instead of questioning everything I do. But I'd be lying if I said this whole thing didn't change how I see workplace relationships. I'm more cautious now. I document everything. I save original copies of all communications. I trust people less easily. The irony is that Jennifer probably could have gotten the promotion on her own merit if she'd just focused on doing good work instead of sabotaging me. She was talented. She had good client relationships. But she was so convinced the only way to get ahead was to tear someone else down that she destroyed her entire career over it. Every now and then, someone from the old team asks if I've heard from her. I just say no and change the subject. Whatever Jennifer's doing now, wherever she ended up, that's not my problem anymore. She made her choices, she dealt with the consequences, and I moved on. Workplace revenge is satisfying, but nothing compares to the moment when you catch someone red-handed doing something they swore they'd never do. My mom and I hadn't spoken in 2 years, not because of some huge blowout fight, but because of this slow accumulation of her controlling behavior that eventually became too much. She'd criticize every decision I made, show up unannounced at my apartment, call my friends to check up on me like I was still 15. It got to the point where I had to block her number just to have some peace. My dad would call occasionally to play mediator, but I held firm. I needed space. Then my therapist suggested maybe it was time to try reconciliation. Not for her, but for me. To see if we could establish some kind of adult relationship with boundaries. I thought about it for weeks. Part of me wanted to just leave things as they were, but another part missed having a mum, even if ours had always been complicated. So I decided to show up at their house with flowers and this letter I'd written explaining what I needed from her if we were going to move forward. Very therapy approved, very mature. I drove to their place on a Saturday afternoon. I still had my old key from when I lived there, and I figured I'd let myself in and surprise her. In my head, it was going to be this emotional moment where she'd see me standing there with flowers and we'd both cry and hug it out. I was genuinely hopeful. I parked in the driveway, grabbed the bouquet and the letter, and used my key to open the front door as quietly as possible. The living room was directly ahead. The same living room where I'd spent my entire childhood watching cartoons on Saturday mornings, where we'd opened Christmas presents, where I'd done homework at the coffee table. And there was my mom on the couch kissing a man who was absolutely not my father. Her hands were in his hair. His hands were on her waist. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't hear me come in. I just stood there. I couldn't move. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The flowers felt heavy in my hand. The letter suddenly seemed like the most naive thing I'd ever written. And then my mom opened her eyes and saw me standing in the doorway. She screamed, actually screamed, shoved the guy off her so hard he almost fell off the couch. The man, whoever he was, looked at me with this expression of pure panic, grabbed his jacket, and literally ran out the back door. Didn't say a word, just bolted like the house was on fire. And I'm still standing there frozen, holding these stupid flowers that were supposed to represent a fresh start. My mum started talking immediately. Rapid fire explanations that didn't explain anything. It's not what it looks like. This is the first time. I was going to end it. Please don't tell your father. We can work through this as a family. She was crying and reaching for me, and I stepped back because I couldn't let her touch me. Not right then. The woman who'd spent my entire life lecturing me about morals and responsibility and doing the right thing had just been caught cheating on my dad in their living room. I asked her how long. She swore it had only been a few weeks, that it was a mistake, that she loved my father and this meant nothing. I didn't believe her. You don't kiss someone like that if it's new. You don't have that level of comfort with someone you barely know. But she kept insisting, kept begging me not to say anything, kept promising she'd end it immediately and Dad would never have to know. And here's where it gets absurd. She actually tried to guilt me, said that telling Dad would destroy our family, that I'd be responsible for breaking up a 30-year marriage, that my siblings would never forgive me, like I was the one who'd done something wrong, like I'd somehow caused this by walking into my own childhood home. I told her she had 24 hours to tell Dad herself, that if she actually cared about him or our family, she'd come clean and let him decide what he wanted to do with that information. She nodded, agreed, promised me she would. Then she asked for the flowers I was still holding. I looked down at them, these cheerful yellow roses I'd picked out so carefully, and I set them on the table and walked out. I sat in my car for 20 minutes just trying to breathe. I'd come here to fix our relationship, and instead I'd walked into proof that she'd been lying to everyone. I felt sick, angry, betrayed on my dad's behalf, and underneath all of that, weirdly sad that the reconciliation I'd been building up in my head was never going to happen now. Before I drove away, I did something I'm not entirely proud of, but don't regret. I took photos. I'd had my phone in my hand when I walked in, and I'd instinctively taken pictures of what I'd seen before. My brain even caught up to what I was doing. My mom on the couch with that man, the guilt on her face when she saw me. I don't know if I took them as insurance or just evidence that I wasn't going crazy, but I had them. 24 hours came and went. Dad called me that evening asking if I'd stop by, because Mom mentioned seeing my car in the driveway. I could hear her in the background, probably panicking. I told Dad I had stopped by, but Mom and I needed to talk privately, and I'd call him soon. I gave her the time I'd promised. She didn't use it. The next day I drove back to their house. Dad was home this time. I asked if we could talk alone. Mom looked at me with these desperate eyes, silently begging me to stay quiet. I ignored her. Dad and I went to his office and I told him everything. Showed him the photos, watched his face crumble as he looked at proof of his wife's affair in their own living room. He didn't yell. He didn't cry in front of me. He just got very quiet and asked me to leave so he could process. I hugged him on my way out, and he held on longer than usual. When I passed through the living room, Mom was sitting on that same couch, and the look she gave me was pure hatred, like I'd ruined her life instead of just exposed what she'd been doing. Dad filed for divorce within a week, didn't even try counseling or separation, just went straight to a lawyer and started the process. Mum apparently tried to deny everything at first, said I'd misunderstood what I saw, that the photos were taken out of context. But Dad didn't care about her excuses. The trust was gone. That's when everything unraveled. My siblings got involved. I have a younger brother and sister, both still in college, and they immediately split into camps. My brother, believe me, was furious at Mum for what she'd done. My sister thought I should have stayed out of it, that I'd destroyed our family by not minding my own business. We had this massive fight over text, where she called me vindictive and said I'd only told Dad to hurt Mum because of our existing issues. That one stung because part of me wondered if she was right. Mum launched a full campaign to paint herself as the victim, told extended family that I'd always been dramatic, that I'd exaggerated what I saw because I wanted to hurt her, that the divorce was my fault. Some relatives believed her. My aunt stopped talking to me. My grandmother called to say she was disappointed in how I'd handled things. Never mind that Mum had been cheating. Somehow I was the villain for telling the truth. Dad thanks me every time I see him. But he looks broken. He's lost weight, doesn't sleep well, moved into an apartment that's too empty and too quiet. He says he's glad he knows the truth, that living a lie would have been worse, but I can see what this has cost him. 30 years of marriage gone, the future he'd planned, retirement together, growing old together, all of it just erased. And some days I wonder if ignorance really would have been better for him, even though I know that's not fair to either of us. Mum blames me for everything. She tells people I destroyed the family because I couldn't let go of old grudges, that I used what I saw as ammunition in our personal war. She's never once acknowledged that she made the choice to cheat, that she had multiple opportunities to come clean and chose to lie instead. In her version of events, she's the wronged party and I'm the cruel daughter who ruined everything. I went to that house looking for closure, hoping to rebuild something with my mum. Instead, I found proof that the woman I'd been trying to reconnect with had been lying to everyone who loved her. I didn't destroy the family. She did, but telling the truth cost me relationships anyway. My sister barely speaks to me. Half my extended family thinks I'm a troublemaker, and my mum, the person I'd driven there to reconcile with, will probably hate me for the rest of her life. The therapist who suggested reaching out feels terrible, like this is somehow her fault. I keep telling her it's not. How could either of us have predicted what I'd walk into? But I'd be lying if I said I don't have moments where I wish I'd never gone there, never used that key, never seen what I saw. Life would definitely be simpler. Whether it would be better is a question I still can't answer. Dad's doing okay, all things considered. He's dating someone new actually, which feels surreal. Mum's still in the house, still seeing that guy as far as I know, though she's careful about it now. My brother comes over for dinner sometimes and we don't talk about her. My sister sends passive-aggressive texts about family loyalty that I mostly ignore. I don't regret telling Dad. He deserved to know the truth about his marriage. But I do regret that trying to fix one broken relationship led to the complete destruction of everything else. The reconciliation I wanted with my mum is never going to happen now. And the family I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. It probably didn't exist before either. But at least I didn't have to see the reality of it so clearly. Sometimes trying to fix one relationship reveals the truth about another, especially when people start lying about their location. David texted me around 11 on Saturday morning. Emergency meeting downtown. Boss needs me there by noon. So sorry, but we'll have to reschedule your birthday dinner. I stared at that message for a solid minute because something about it felt wrong. David worked in corporate finance at a firm that was strict about work-life balance. They didn't do weekend meetings. They definitely didn't do last-minute emergency Saturday meetings that required in-person attendance. I texted back asking if everything was okay, if this was normal. He said, yeah, totally normal. Just some client crisis that needed immediate attention. He'd make it up to me. Take me somewhere nice next weekend. The reassurance felt performative, like he was saying what he thought I wanted to hear, rather than actually addressing my concern. We'd been engaged for 8 months, together for 2 years before that. We had this family location sharing thing set up on our phone plan because David had insisted on it for safety reasons. Said it would give us both peace of mind, knowing where the other was if something happened. I'd thought it was sweet at the time, this sign that he cared about my well-being. Now I pulled up the app out of pure instinct. David was not downtown. He wasn't anywhere near his office building or the financial district. The little dot with his name was across town in a residential neighborhood I'd never heard him mention. I watched it for a few minutes to make sure the app wasn't glitching. The dot didn't move. He was stationary at some address that meant nothing to me. I sat there with my phone trying to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe the client lived there and they were meeting at their home. Maybe it was a coworker's place and they were working remotely. Maybe the app was wrong, but none of those explanations felt right. If it was a legitimate work meeting at someone's house, why lie about it being downtown? Why not just say where he actually was? I got in my car. I don't know if I was planning to confront him or just drive by to see what was going on, but I needed to know. The address was about 20 minutes away. I plugged it into my GPS and drove through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer until I was in an area of new townhouses with manicured lawns and identical architecture. David's car was parked on the street outside one of them. I parked behind his car and sat there for a minute gathering courage. Part of me still believed there'd be some reasonable explanation. Maybe this was a surprise party he was planning. Maybe he was helping a friend with something. Maybe I was about to feel really stupid for doubting him. I walked up to the front door and knocked. A woman answered. She was maybe 28, 30 at most, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. And she was visibly pregnant, probably 6 months along based on how she was carrying. She looked at me with friendly confusion and asked if she could help me. I asked if David was here. Her expression changed immediately to something more guarded. She asked who I was. I said I was David's fiancée and we were supposed to have dinner tonight for my birthday, but he'd cancelled saying he had a work meeting and his phone location showed he was at this address. The color drained from her face. She stepped back from the door, and David appeared behind her looking like he'd seen a ghost. The silence that followed was one of the most surreal moments of my life. We all just stood there, me on the doorstep, this pregnant woman in her own home. David frozen between us like he couldn't decide which direction to run. Then the woman, her name was Lauren, I learned later, asked very quietly if I'd just said I was David's fiancée. I said yes and held up my left hand to show the ring. She looked at David with this expression of complete betrayal and said, "You told me you'd broken up with her 6 months ago. You said she moved away and you'd ended things." That's when everything unraveled. Lauren wasn't some mistress. She wasn't a side piece David was sneaking around with. She was his fiancée too. He'd proposed to her a year ago, 4 months before he proposed to me. She lived in this townhouse that he'd helped her buy. She was 6 months pregnant with his child, and he'd been living two completely separate lives, somehow managing to maintain two relationships, two homes, two futures without either of us knowing the other existed. Lauren invited me inside. David tried to object, but we both ignored him. We sat at her kitchen table and started comparing notes, while he stood there looking like he wanted to sink through the floor. The coordination it must have taken was honestly staggering. He told me he traveled for work twice a month. He was actually staying here with Lauren. He told Lauren he had a roommate who was going through a hard time, so he needed to stay at his old place sometimes to help out. That was my apartment. Lauren pulled up photos on her phone. David at her baby shower last month when he told me he was at a conference in Chicago. David helping paint the nursery when he'd said he was working late on a big project. David at her parents' house for Thanksgiving, the same Thanksgiving he'd spent with my family, claiming he couldn't get time off work to visit his own relatives. I showed her photos from our engagement party, from trips we'd taken, from last Christmas when he'd given me this ring. She started crying, not dramatic sobbing, just tears running down her face while she kept scrolling through evidence of his double life. I felt numb. Like this was happening to someone else and I was just watching it unfold. David finally tried to speak, started saying he could explain, that he'd gotten in too deep and didn't know how to get out, that he cared about both of us. Lauren cut him off, asked him point blank if he'd planned to just keep this going forever. Was he going to be at the hospital when she gave birth, or would that be a work emergency too? Was he planning to marry both of us? How exactly did he think this was going to end? He didn't have answers, just kept saying he was sorry, he'd made mistakes, he'd never meant to hurt anyone. The audacity of that statement while sitting in the home he shared with his pregnant fiancée, while his other fiancée sat across from her, was almost impressive. But that wasn't even the worst part. Lauren asked how he was planning to handle child support and custody. David got defensive, said they'd figure it out. He'd be there for his kid. She laughed, this bitter sound, and said he'd told her 2 weeks ago he'd gotten a vasectomy years ago, and the pregnancy was a miracle. I physically recoiled because he told me the same thing 3 months into our relationship, when we talked about birth control. He'd lied about being sterile to avoid conversations about protection or pregnancy with both of us. The baby wasn't a surprise to him. He'd known exactly what he was doing. Lauren stood up and told him to leave. Just like that, told him to get out of her house and not come back. When he tried to argue, tried to say they needed to talk about the baby, she said talk to my lawyer. She wanted him gone immediately. He looked at me like I might somehow defend him or ask him to stay. I stood up and walked out without saying a word. We both left him that day. Lauren filed for child support before the baby was even born. I broke off our engagement, moved out of what I'd thought was our shared future, and blocked his number. Our families were devastated. My parents had loved David. My friends had thought we were perfect together. Explaining what happened was humiliating, like I should have somehow known I was only getting half a partner. David tried to reach out multiple times, emails, messages from unknown numbers, even showing up at my new apartment once. He had this whole speech prepared about how he'd made terrible choices, but really did love me and wanted to make things right. I told him through the door that he couldn't make this right. That trust once broken, this thoroughly doesn't get repaired, and if he showed up again, I'd call the police. Lauren and I don't keep in touch, which feels right somehow. We bonded over our mutual betrayal that one afternoon, but we don't need to be friends. She did text me once when the baby was born, just to let me know. I sent congratulations and wished her well. She deserves better than being tied to David for the next 18 years through child support and custody arrangements. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, David's still living in that townhouse alone. Lauren moved back in with her parents after the baby came. He's paying child support and has supervised visitation because Lauren doesn't trust him alone with their daughter. Both our families have cut him off. His friends don't return his calls. He destroyed 2 relationships and countless others in the blast radius. People ask if I saw signs I should have caught. Honestly, maybe. The work trips that were always the same 2 weeks each month. The way he never wanted me to meet his boss or co-workers. How he was weirdly secretive about his phone. But none of it seemed like red flags at the time. Just quirks of a private person with a demanding job. The location-sharing app he'd insisted on for safety ended up being the thing that exposed him. The tool he thought would make him seem caring and trustworthy became the evidence of his lies. There's something poetic about that, about being caught by the very system you put in place to appear honest. I'm doing better now, dating again cautiously. I don't share locations with anyone anymore, though. That particular feature makes me anxious in ways I can't quite shake, but I'm rebuilding, learning to trust my instincts again, and I'm grateful I found out before we were married, before there were kids involved, before I'd wasted more years on someone who saw relationships as stories he could control instead of commitments he needed to honor. Lies about location are one thing, but what happens when someone's confession destroys an entire marriage in a single night? Paul texted me on a Tuesday afternoon asking if we could meet for coffee. Just the 2 of us. He said he needed to talk to me about something important regarding Claire, my sister, his wife of 3 years. I figured maybe he was planning a surprise party or needed help picking out an anniversary gift. Something normal, something that made sense. I agreed to meet him the next day at this quiet coffee shop near my apartment. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking agitated. His leg was bouncing under the table, and he kept fidgeting with his cup. I sat down and asked what was going on, if Claire was okay. He said she was fine, physically, but that he needed to tell me something he'd been holding in for years. The way he said it made my stomach drop. This wasn't about a surprise party. Paul took a deep breath and told me he'd made a mistake, that he'd married the wrong sister, that he'd been in love with me since the moment we met at their engagement party 4 years ago, and he'd convinced himself those feelings would disappear once he and Claire got married. They hadn't. If anything, they'd gotten stronger. He said every family dinner, every holiday, every time we were all together, it was torture for him because he wanted to be with me instead. I just sat there, unable to process what I was hearing. This man, my sister's husband, someone I'd considered family, was confessing that his entire marriage was based on a lie. He kept talking, saying he thought we had undeniable chemistry, that he'd catch me looking at him sometimes and wondered if I felt it too. I'd never looked at him any kind of way. He was my brother-in-law. The idea was genuinely repulsive. Then he said he wanted to leave Claire, for me, that we could finally be together the way we were supposed to be. And yes, it would hurt people initially, but eventually everyone would understand that this was real love. He reached across the table like he was going to take my hand, and I pulled back so fast I almost knocked over my coffee. I told him he was delusional, that I had never, not once, thought of him as anything other than my sister's husband, that what he was describing was a fantasy he'd created entirely in his own head. He looked genuinely shocked, like he couldn't believe I wasn't reciprocating. He started insisting that I was in denial, that I just needed time to process my real feelings, that once Claire was out of the picture, I'd see things clearly. That's when I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to open the voice recorder app and hit record. I set it on the table between us and told him to say all of that again. He hesitated, confused. I said, "If you really believe what you're saying, if you're really planning to leave my sister for me, then you won't have a problem repeating it." So he did. He laid out the whole thing again. How he'd married Claire while being in love with me. How he'd spent 3 years pretending. How he wanted us to be together. The moment he finished talking, I stopped the recording, called Claire, and she answered on the second ring. I didn't say hello. I just hit play. Paul's voice came through the speaker, clear as day, confessing everything he'd just told me. I watched the color drain from his face as he realized what I'd done. He started reaching for my phone, trying to hang up, but I held it away from him. Claire didn't say anything while the recording played. The silence on her end was somehow worse than if she'd been screaming. When it finished, she asked where we were. I told her the name of the coffee shop. She said she'd be there in 20 minutes and hung up. Paul looked at me like I'd betrayed him. He actually said I shouldn't have done that we could have handled this differently. The audacity was genuinely impressive. I told him to stay in his seat and not move. He tried to leave anyway, said he needed to go talk to Claire privately, explain things properly. I told him if he left before she got here, I'd send the recording to his parents, his friends, his co-workers, everyone. He sat back down. We waited in the most uncomfortable silence I've ever experienced. He tried to talk to me twice. I told him he'd said enough. Claire walked into that coffee shop exactly 19 minutes later, and I will never forget the look on her face. Not angry yet, just devastated, broken. She walked straight to our table, and Paul stood up, started to say her name, and she slapped him. Hard. The whole coffee shop went silent. She pulled off her wedding ring and threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and skittered across the floor. Then she turned to me and asked if I wanted to leave. We walked out together while Paul just stood there. But that wasn't even the worst part. In the car, Claire told me she'd been feeling like something was off for months. Paul had been distant, distracted. She'd started to wonder if he was having an affair, but she'd convinced herself she was being paranoid. Finding out he'd been emotionally cheating with the idea of her own sister for their entire marriage was somehow worse than if it had been a stranger. It meant every moment of their relationship had been contaminated by his fantasy. Claire moved out that night, went to their apartment with our dad and our brother, packed her essentials, and stayed with our parents. Paul tried calling her probably 50 times. She blocked his number. He tried calling me. I blocked him too. He showed up at my apartment 2 days later, and I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. He finally got the message, or so I thought. The divorce was brutal and fast. Claire wanted nothing from him except to be free. No drawn-out property disputes, no fighting over furniture. She just wanted out. Their lawyer handled most of it, and they were legally separated within weeks, divorce finalized in a few months. Paul tried to drag it out, kept asking for mediation, for a chance to explain himself. Claire refused every time. Then the text started. Paul would message me from new numbers, different apps, whatever he could find to get around being blocked. He'd say I misunderstood his intentions, that he'd only been confused, that he never meant to hurt Claire. He'd apologize and then in the next message say he still thought we could have something special if I'd just give him a chance. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. He couldn't decide if he was sorry or still pursuing me. I saved every message and forwarded them to Claire's lawyer. They added it to the file as evidence of harassment. Paul finally stopped after he got a formal cease and desist letter. Even then, I'd occasionally see him watching my social media stories from fake accounts. I made everything private, changed my routines, started being hyper-aware of my surroundings because I genuinely didn't trust that he'd actually let this go. Claire's in therapy now, working through the betrayal. She told me the hardest part isn't even the divorce. It's rewriting her entire understanding of her marriage. Every memory is tainted. Every sweet moment they shared, she now wonders if he was thinking about me. Every time he said I love you, she questions if he meant it or if he was just playing a role. That kind of betrayal doesn't heal quickly. Family dinners are complicated now. Paul was genuinely loved by everyone. My parents had considered him a son. My brother used to go to baseball games with him. When the truth came out, everyone was shocked. Some relatives didn't believe it at first, thought maybe there'd been a misunderstanding. But I had the recording. Claire played it for our parents. There was no ambiguity. My parents struggle with it in their own way. My mum keeps saying she should have seen the signs, though I don't know what signs there could have been. Paul was a good actor. He played the role of devoted husband while harboring this entire alternate reality in his head. My dad doesn't talk about it much, but I know it bothers him. The idea that his former son-in-law married one daughter while fantasizing about the other is the kind of thing that makes family gatherings permanently awkward. Claire's doing better now. She's dating someone new, though she's understandably cautious. She told me recently that she's grateful I recorded that conversation and called her immediately. Some part of her wonders what would have happened if I'd tried to handle it quietly, if I'd gone to her privately. Would she have believed me without proof? Would Paul have been able to manipulate the narrative? I think about that too sometimes. If I hadn't recorded him, it would have been my word against his. He could have claimed I misunderstood, that I was causing drama. The recording made it impossible for him to lie his way out. It protected both of us from his version of events. Paul moved to a different city about 6 months after the divorce. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he's seeing someone new. I genuinely hope he's gotten therapy and worked through whatever made him think marrying someone while being in love with their sister was acceptable. But mostly, I just hope he stays far away from me and Claire. The whole situation taught me that some people can look you in the eye, sit at your family's dinner table, and be living in a completely different reality than everyone else. Paul spent years pretending to be someone he wasn't, building a marriage on a foundation of lies and fantasy. And when it all came crashing down, he still somehow thought he was the victim. Claire and I are closer now than we've ever been. Trauma bonding is real. We have this shared understanding that we survived something genuinely bizarre and disturbing together. She knows I'll always have her back, and I know she's stronger than she gives herself credit for, because walking away from that marriage took courage. From unwanted confessions to calculated accusations, the next story shows what happens when someone tries to take you down, and karma strikes back hard. Jessica and I had been best friends since middle school. The kind of friendship where you know each other's families, share clothes, finish each other's sentences. We'd been through breakups, graduations, first apartments, everything together. So when she started dating Connor, I was genuinely happy for her. He seemed like a good guy. I had zero interest in him romantically. The thought never even crossed my mind. Then one morning I woke up to 37 missed messages in our friend group chat. I opened it expecting some funny meme or drama about someone else, but instead I found myself at the center of an absolute nightmare. Jessica had posted screenshots of text messages between me and Connor. Flirty messages, suggestive messages, messages where I was supposedly coming onto him and arranging to meet up behind her back. The group chat was already in full meltdown mode. People were calling me a terrible friend, a backstabber, asking how I could do this to Jessica. I scrolled through those screenshots feeling like I was losing my mind because I had never sent those messages. The conversations looked real. They had my name, my profile picture, timestamps that seemed legitimate, but the actual content, the words themselves, I'd never written them. I tried to explain this in the group chat, tried to say something was wrong, that these weren't real. No one believed me. Jessica had already painted the narrative. She was the devastated girlfriend whose best friend had betrayed her. I was the villain. Within hours, I was completely ostracized. People blocked me on social media. Plans I'd had with friends got cancelled without explanation. Jessica posted this long emotional message about betrayal and trust, and everyone rallied around her. I was totally alone. When I tried reaching out to individual friends to explain, they either ignored me or told me they didn't want to hear my excuses. The evidence was right there in black and white. What could I possibly say? I spent 2 weeks in this horrible limbo. I'd lost my entire friend group overnight. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept going over those screenshots trying to figure out what had happened. Had my account been hacked? Had someone spoofed my number? None of it made sense. Then I remembered something. About a year ago, I'd set up automatic cloud backups for all my messages. It was this paranoia thing after I'd lost my phone once and lost months of conversations. Every text, every app message, everything got backed up with timestamps. I logged into my cloud storage and started searching for conversations with Connor. What I found was completely different from what Jessica had posted. The real messages were totally platonic. Him asking if Jessica mentioned what she wanted for her birthday. Me sending him a link to a restaurant she'd been wanting to try. Basic friendly exchanges between people who who were connected through someone they both cared about. Nothing flirty, nothing inappropriate, nothing even remotely close to what Jessica had shown everyone. I compared the screenshots side by side. She'd taken our real conversations and edited them, changed my words completely, made innocent messages look incriminating. The timestamps were close to accurate, which is probably why no one questioned them, but the actual content was fabricated. She'd put in the effort to make it look real, and it had worked perfectly, but that wasn't even the worst part. I kept digging through my backups, looking for anything else that might explain why she'd done this. That's when I found deleted messages between Jessica and another friend from a few months back. Messages where Jessica was complaining about me getting a marketing job at a company she'd also applied to. She'd been rejected, I'd been hired, and apparently that had festered. In one message, she literally wrote that she was going to set me up, make everyone see what a terrible person I really was. She'd planned this, deliberately, because I got a job she wanted. Reading those messages felt surreal. This person I'd trusted for over a decade had orchestrated my complete social destruction over a job. She'd weaponized her boyfriend, fabricated evidence, and turned everyone against me, and she'd almost gotten away with it. I knew what I had to do, but I wanted to be smart about it. I wasn't going to just screenshot everything and post it in the group chat, where it could be dismissed or deleted. I needed something more permanent, more undeniable. So I created a simple website, nothing fancy, just a basic page with a timeline. I uploaded every receipt, the original unedited conversations with Connor, showing they were completely innocent. The screenshots Jessica had posted with my annotations showing exactly what she'd changed. The deleted messages where she admitted to setting me up. Everything had timestamps, metadata, the works. Then I sent the link to everyone. Every single person in that friend group got the same message from me. No long explanation. No emotional plea. Just the link and one sentence asking them to look at the evidence before making final judgments about who I was. The group chat absolutely exploded. I'd muted it after being kicked out, but people started messaging me directly. They were horrified, angry, some were apologetic, others were just shocked. The website made it impossible to deny what Jessica had done. The metadata proved the messages were authentic. The timestamp showed when she'd sent those messages about setting me up, which was before she'd posted the fake screenshots. It was all there, undeniable. Jessica's response was to claim I'd hacked her phone and fabricated everything, that the website was fake, that I was so desperate to clear my name, I'd created elaborate forgeries. But several people in the group had tech backgrounds. They checked the metadata themselves. They verified the timestamps. One friend even contacted the cloud storage company to confirm the backups were legitimate and hadn't been tampered with. Jessica's story fell apart under any scrutiny. People started dropping her immediately. The same friends who'd blocked me unblocked me and apologized. They felt guilty for not listening, for believing Jessica so easily. I appreciated the apologies, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt that they'd been so quick to condemn me without even asking for my side. Connor dumped Jessica when he realized she'd used him as a weapon in her scheme. He was humiliated that his conversations had been manipulated and that he'd unknowingly been part of destroying someone's reputation. He apologized to me, said he had no idea Jessica was capable of something like this. I told him I appreciated it, but asked him to give me space. I didn't want to be friends with him. Too much had happened. Jessica tried to salvage her reputation for a while, posted vague things on social media about being misunderstood and attacked, but everyone who mattered had seen the evidence. Eventually, she deleted most of her social media and moved to a different city. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she told people there she'd moved for a job, but we all knew the truth. She couldn't face what she'd done, so she ran. I got my friends back, or most of them anyway, but things aren't the same. There's this underlying tension now, this awareness that friendships can be destroyed with lies, and that evidence doesn't always matter if people want to believe a certain narrative. Some friends feel guiltier than others about how they treated me. A few never really apologized properly, and we just kind of drifted apart naturally. The whole experience changed how I see relationships and proof and trust. I back up everything now, every conversation, every photo, every email. It's probably excessive and definitely paranoid, but I never want to be in a position again where someone can rewrite reality and I can't prove what actually happened. I check my backups obsessively, make sure they're current, make sure nothing's corrupted, make sure I have evidence of my actual life and not someone else's version of it. People tell me I should let it go, that I won. I exposed Jessica and got my life back, but winning doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo the 2 weeks where I thought I'd lost everything over lies. It doesn't rebuild the automatic trust I used to have in friendships. I'm more guarded now, more skeptical. I fact-check things people tell me even when I know I'm being paranoid. Jessica's moved on with her life somewhere else. I assume she's made new friends who don't know what she did. Maybe she's different now. Maybe she learned something. Or maybe she's just waiting for the next person to wrong her, so she can do this all over again. I don't know, and I don't care to find out. What I do know is that digital evidence saved me when nothing else could. Those backups were the only reason anyone believed the truth. Without them, Jessica's version would have stood. I'd still be the terrible friend who betrayed her. The thought of that alternate timeline where I had no proof and just had to live with everyone thinking the worst of me, that's what keeps me backing everything up. That's what makes me triple check my cloud storage. The friends I kept are good people. They apologized, they learned. They're more careful about believing accusations without evidence now. But there's still this crack in the foundation. This knowledge that they were willing to cut me off completely based on screenshots they never verified. I forgive them, but I haven't forgotten, and I don't think I ever will. Digital evidence saved me, but the next person's nightmare started with a credit card statement that revealed an impossible trip. I handle most of our finances, not because Lisa couldn't, but because I'm one of those people who actually enjoys organizing spreadsheets and tracking expenses. It's weirdly relaxing for me, so when our joint credit card statement came in the mail, I did what I always do. Made myself coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and started going through the charges line by line. Everything looked normal at first. Grocery store, gas station, her favorite coffee shop, the usual streaming subscriptions. Then I hit a cluster of charges from Miami that made my stomach drop. A luxury hotel, 3 nights. Charges at restaurants I'd never heard of but could tell were expensive based on the amounts. A couple's spa package at the hotel for $400, and we had never been to Miami together. Not recently, not ever. I sat there staring at these charges, trying to make sense of them. My first thought was fraud. Someone had stolen our card information and was living it up in Florida on our dime. But the charges were spread over 3 days in a pattern that looked like an actual trip, not random fraud. Dinner the first night, breakfast the next morning, spa appointment in the afternoon. It was too organized, too deliberate. When Lisa got home from work that evening, I had the statement on the table. I asked her about Miami as casually as I could manage. "Oh yeah," she said, "that was a work trip a few weeks ago. She'd submitted all the expense reports and the company would reimburse us. Just hadn't processed yet." She said it so smoothly, so confidently, that I almost believed her. Almost. But something didn't add up. I handle our finances. I know what business expenses look like. Lisa's work trips usually involve charges at hotel chains that have conference facilities, meals at generic restaurant chains near convention centers, maybe a Starbucks or two. These Miami charges were at a boutique hotel with an ocean view and restaurants that had names like Sapphire Coast and Lumiere. The kind of places you take someone you're trying to impress, not where you grab dinner between sales meetings. And then there was the couple's spa package. What business trip includes a couple's spa package? I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to be sure before I accused her of anything. So I did something I'm not particularly proud of, but don't regret. I called the hotel, told them I was calling to confirm a reservation for our anniversary trip, gave them the dates from the credit card statement, said my wife had made the booking, and I wanted to verify everything was set. The woman on the phone was incredibly helpful. Too helpful. She pulled up the reservation and cheerfully confirmed that Mr. and Mrs. Anderson had stayed with them, that they'd enjoyed the Ocean View Suite, and she hoped we'd had a wonderful time. She asked if we'd be returning for our anniversary this year. I managed to say we were considering it. Then, trying to keep my voice steady, I asked if she could confirm the name on the reservation, so I could make sure my wife had spelled everything correctly for our upcoming trip. She said of course, and rattled off Derek and Lisa Anderson. Derek, not my name. Derek, her colleague from work, The guy she'd mentioned maybe twice in passing over the past year. The guy she said was helping train her on some new software. Derek had been to Miami with my wife, stayed in a romantic hotel suite with her, and apparently signed them in as Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. I thanked the hotel employee and hung up before she could hear my voice crack. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building, where I'd driven to make the call in private, and I had to accept that my wife was having an affair. The woman I'd been married to for 6 years had gone to Miami with another man, spent our money on a romantic getaway, and lied to my face about it being a work trip. I hired a private investigator that same day. I needed proof, real documented proof, before I confronted her, because I knew Lisa would deny it. She'd have explanations, she'd twist things. I needed evidence she couldn't talk her way around. The investigator was expensive but thorough. Within 2 weeks, he had photos of Lisa and Derek having lunch together, leaving work together, going to his apartment together. He confirmed they'd been involved for at least 7 months based on the pattern of behavior he could document. 7 months, more than half a year of lies. I thought about all the times she'd said she was working late, all the weekends she'd claimed the office needed her for special projects, all the business trips that now felt suspicious. How many of those had actually been with Derek? How much of our life together over the past 7 months had been a complete fabrication? But that wasn't even the worst part. When I finally confronted Lisa with everything, the hotel confirmation, the investigator's report, the photos, she didn't even try to deny it. She just looked tired and said she was sorry I found out this way. Sorry I found out this way. Not sorry she did it. Sorry I caught her. She admitted everything, said she'd met Derek during a legitimate business trip about 8 months ago. They'd connected over drinks after a conference session. One thing led to another. She claimed she'd tried to end it multiple times but kept getting pulled back. She said she loved me, but she was also in love with Derek and didn't know what to do. As if her confusion somehow made the betrayal less devastating. I asked about Miami specifically. She said it was supposed to be their last trip together, that she was going to end things with Derek and recommit to our marriage. The couple's spa package was his idea, a final romantic gesture before they said goodbye. Except clearly that goodbye never happened because the investigators' photos were from 2 weeks after Miami, and they were very much still together. I moved out that week, stayed with my brother while I figured out what to do next. Lisa tried to convince me to go to counseling, said we could work through this if I just gave her a chance. But I was done. You don't accidentally have a 7-month affair. You don't accidentally book romantic hotels and spa packages. Those are choices, deliberate choices, made over and over again. The divorce was relatively quick. We didn't have kids. We split assets down the middle. I kept the house because I could afford the mortgage on my own, and Lisa wanted to move anyway. She claimed the house had too many memories, which was rich coming from someone who'd created plenty of memories I now wished I could erase. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Lisa and Derek got married 11 months after our divorce was finalized. 11 months, which means they were probably already planning their future together while she was still sleeping in our bed, still wearing her wedding ring, still pretending our marriage meant something. I found out through social media because apparently I hadn't been blocked from everyone's feeds yet. Photos of their wedding on a beach somewhere tropical. Lisa in a white dress, Derek in a linen suit, both of them looking blissfully happy like they hadn't built their relationship on lies and betrayal. The comments were full of congratulations from people who either didn't know about me or didn't care. A few mutual friends reached out to apologize for not warning me, said they'd only found out about Derek after our divorce and didn't know what to say. The worst part about all of it is how it's changed me. I got the house in the divorce, kept most of our shared assets, came out of it financially stable, but I can't look at a credit card statement anymore without feeling paranoid. Every charge gets scrutinized. When I started dating again, I found myself checking my girlfriend's phone, looking for evidence of betrayal that didn't exist. I had to go to therapy just to stop sabotaging a perfectly good relationship because I couldn't trust that someone wasn't lying to me. Lisa occasionally emails, usually around holidays or our old anniversary. She says she hopes I'm doing well, that she never meant to hurt me, that she wishes we could be friends. I don't respond. There's nothing to say. She made her choices and I made mine. Her choice was Derek and romantic Miami getaways, funded by our joint credit card. My choice was to never speak to her again. I'm doing okay now. Better than okay, actually. I'm engaged to someone who understands why I need transparency, why I get anxious about unexplained charges or last-minute work trips. Someone who volunteers information before I have to ask for it. Someone who hasn't given me a single reason to doubt them. But I'd be lying if I said the Lisa situation didn't leave scars. Derek and Lisa are still married as far as I know. Still posting happy couple photos online. Still living their life built on the wreckage of my marriage. And you know what? They can have each other. Anyone willing to start a relationship through deception probably deserves a partner equally comfortable with lying. I wonder sometimes if Derek ever checks their credit card statements, if he ever notices charges that don't quite add up, if Lisa's already moved on to someone new and he just hasn't caught her yet. But honestly, that's not my problem anymore. I got out, I rebuilt, I learned that financial betrayal is just the surface level. The real betrayal is someone looking you in the eye every day and choosing to lie, and no amount of couples spa packages can fix that. Financial betrayal stings, but nothing cuts deeper than when you accidentally expose the exact secret you were trying to hide. I'd been avoiding Brianna for months after missing her wedding, not because I didn't care, but because I felt so guilty about it that I couldn't figure out how to face her. She'd sent me the invitation a year in advance. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid, and then 2 weeks before the wedding, I bailed with some vague excuse about a work emergency that couldn't be rescheduled. She was hurt, angry. She sent me a text saying she understood work comes first for some people, and I knew that passive-aggressive jab was exactly what I deserved. The truth was more complicated. I'd been dealing with severe anxiety for months, the kind that makes you feel like you're dying in the middle of grocery stores. Panic attacks that left me shaking and unable to breathe. I'd finally started treatment, but I was right in the middle of adjusting to new medication when her wedding weekend arrived. My therapist and I both knew that being in a crowded venue, being in the spotlight as a bridesmaid, being around that much social pressure, it would have been a disaster. I would have had a panic attack during the ceremony or the reception, and I didn't want to ruin her day by making it about my mental health crisis. So I lied, said it was work, let her think I valued a job over her wedding. It seemed kinder than the alternative, but months of that guilt ate at me. My therapist kept saying I should reach out, explain the real reason, give Brianna a chance to understand. So I finally worked up the courage to drive to her apartment one Saturday afternoon. I brought coffee and this whole rehearsed speech about how sorry I was and what had really been going on. Brianna let me in, and I could tell she was still hurt but willing to hear me out. We sat on her couch and I explained everything. The anxiety, the panic attacks, the medication adjustment, how I'd been too ashamed to tell her the truth because I didn't want her to think I was making excuses. I told her I'd rather have her hate me for being a bad friend than pity me for being broken. She softened immediately. Her whole face changed from guarded to concerned. She hugged me and said she wished I'd just told her, that she would have understood, that my mental health was more important than being in her wedding party. I felt this massive wave of relief. The apology was working. We were going to be okay. Then she asked the question that ruined everything. Why didn't you just tell me this months ago? Why let me think you didn't care? And without thinking, trying to explain my reasoning, I said because your mum told me to keep all medical stuff private, since she didn't want anyone knowing about her treatments either. I thought that was the family policy or something. The room went completely silent. Brianna pulled back from the hug and stared at me with this expression I couldn't read. She asked what I was talking about. What treatments? That's when I realized I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Brianna's mum, my Aunt Linda, had told me about her cancer diagnosis in confidence about 6 months earlier. She'd called me because she needed someone to drive her to a chemotherapy appointment and didn't want Brianna to know. She was worried about stressing out her daughter during wedding planning. She'd made me promise not to tell anyone, said she'd handle it herself and tell the family when the time was right. I'd completely forgotten that Brianna didn't know. In my head, trying to explain my own medical privacy, I'd just casually referenced her mum's situation like it was common knowledge. And it very much was not. I tried to backtrack, stammered something about maybe I misunderstood, maybe I was confused, but Brianna wasn't stupid. She saw the panic on my face and knew I'd just revealed something massive. She asked me directly if her mum had cancer. I couldn't lie to her face. I just sat there, frozen, and that was answer enough. Brianna grabbed her phone and called her mum right there, put it on speaker, asked point blank if she'd been getting cancer treatment. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then my Aunt Linda started crying and admitted everything. Stage 2 breast cancer. 4 months of chemotherapy. She'd been going to appointments alone, telling Brianna she had book club or errands, lying to her own daughter about where she was and what she was dealing with. Brianna hung up and just stared at me. She wasn't crying, she wasn't yelling. She was completely calm in this terrifying way that was somehow worse than anger. She asked how long I'd known. I told her 6 months. She asked why I didn't tell her. I said because her mum asked me not to, and I thought I was respecting her wishes. Brianna told me to leave, said she needed to process this and couldn't look at me right now. I tried to apologize again, tried to explain that I'd only been trying to help, but she cut me off, said my apology had just destroyed what was left of her family's trust, and she needed me gone. I left. Sat in my car and texted my Aunt Linda to warn her that Brianna knew that I'd accidentally revealed it, that I was so sorry. She didn't respond. I drove home feeling like I'd just set off a bomb in the middle of my family. The fallout was immediate. Brianna went to her mom's house and they had a massive fight. Brianna was devastated that her mom had hidden a cancer diagnosis, that she'd been going through treatment alone, that she'd trusted a cousin over her own daughter. My aunt was mortified and angry that I'd broken her confidence, even accidentally. She'd wanted to tell Brianna on her own terms, when she was ready, and I'd taken that choice away from her. Brianna demanded to be involved in her mother's care going forward. No more secrets, no more hiding appointments, full transparency about the diagnosis and treatment plan. My aunt agreed, but the damage was done. Their relationship, which had always been close, was now strained by months of lies. Brianna felt betrayed, my aunt felt guilty, and both of them blamed me for different reasons. The family fractured over it. Some relatives thought I should have told Brianna immediately when I found out about the cancer, that keeping that secret was wrong. Others thought I'd betrayed my aunt's trust by revealing it at all, even accidentally. Nobody seemed to consider that I'd been put in an impossible position and had genuinely been trying to do the right thing for both of them. I tried to reach out to both Brianna and my aunt separately, sent apology texts, left voicemails, tried to explain that I'd never meant for any of this to happen. My aunt sent one message back saying she needed space and couldn't talk to me right now. Brianna blocked my number entirely. Months passed. I heard through other family members that my aunt had finished her treatment and was in remission, which was a relief. I also heard that she and Brianna had started therapy together to work through the trust issues. They were healing, rebuilding their relationship. That was good. That's what mattered. But I wasn't part of that healing. I'd sent a card when I heard about the remission. No response. I tried reaching out again around the holidays. Nothing. The family gatherings I used to attend, I stopped getting invited to. Not officially excluded, just quietly left off the group texts about who was bringing what to dinner. I ran into Brianna once at a grocery store about a year after everything happened. She was civil but distant, asked how I was doing in that polite way that makes it clear they don't actually want to know. I asked about her mum. She said she was doing well and they were closer than ever now. Then she said she had to go and walked away before I could say anything else. The worst part is knowing that my apology, the thing I thought would fix our relationship, is what destroyed it permanently. I'd gone to her apartment that day trying to repair the damage from missing her wedding. Instead, I'd accidentally detonated a secret that fractured her entire family. The road to hell really is paved with good intentions. I lost both relationships. My cousin who I'd grown up with, who'd been like a sister to me, and my aunt, who trusted me with the biggest secret of her life. They've reconciled with each other, worked through the lies and the hurt, but I'm the permanent reminder of that painful chapter. The person who broke the confidence, even if it was an accident. The outsider who proved you can't trust people with your secrets. I still think about what I should have done differently. Should I have told Brianna about her mum's cancer the moment I found out? Should I have refused to help my aunt with her appointments unless she told her daughter? Should I have just kept my mouth shut that day instead of trying to explain my own medical privacy? There's no good answer. Every choice I could have made would have hurt someone. But the choice I did make, the accidental revelation during an apology, hurt everyone, and I'm the one who has to live with that. Secrets tend to destroy families, especially when they're buried in legal documents that shouldn't exist. Dad died on a Tuesday. Massive heart attack at his desk, gone before the ambulance arrived. He was 61, seemingly healthy, no warning signs. One day he was here and the next he wasn't. The grief was immediate and overwhelming. But there was also this strange comfort in having my siblings and Mum all together, united in our loss. We planned the funeral as a family, went through his things, supported each other. It felt like us against the world, the way families are supposed to be in tragedy. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. Standard procedure, the attorney said. Dad had been meticulous about his estate planning, everything organized and documented. We figured it would be straightforward. The house would go to Mom, his retirement account split between us kids, maybe some specific items allocated to each of us. Dad was practical like that. He wouldn't have left anything complicated or messy. We sat in the attorney's office, me and my older sister Grace and my younger brother Colin, with Mom in the chair beside us. The attorney, this older guy named Mr. Harrison, who'd handled Dad's legal stuff for years, pulled out the documents and started going through the preliminaries. Then he mentioned the beneficiaries. There were 4. My mother, Grace, Colin, myself, and someone named Michael Peterson from Portland. I looked at Grace. She looked at Colin. We all looked at Mom. Who was Michael Peterson? The attorney noticed our confusion and glanced down at his notes with this uncomfortable expression. He cleared his throat and said he'd assumed we were all aware of the situation, but, given our reactions, perhaps not. Michael Peterson was our half-brother, Dad's son from an affair 23 years ago, with a woman he'd worked with briefly. The affair had ended, the woman had kept the baby, and Dad had been paying child support quietly ever since. Michael was 22 years old and, according to the will, entitled to a full quarter share of Dad's estate equal to each of us. The room went completely silent. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Grace started crying immediately, these shocked sobs she couldn't control. Colin just stared at the attorney like he'd started speaking another language, and Mom sat absolutely rigid in her chair, staring straight ahead, confirming with her silence that she'd known all along. Mr. Harrison offered to give us time, but I needed answers right then. I asked Mom directly if she'd known about this. She nodded once, barely perceptible. I asked how long. She said since the beginning, since the affair happened. Dad had confessed everything 23 years ago, and she'd chosen to forgive him and help him handle the situation quietly. Quietly. That was the word she used, like this wasn't a massive betrayal, but a minor inconvenience they'd managed together. She explained that the child support had come out of a separate account, that she'd helped Dad budget for it, that they'd agreed never to tell us kids because what good would it do? Michael was being cared for. His mother wanted minimal involvement from our family. It was better, Mum said, to just let him exist separately. And here's where it gets absurd. I remembered seeing budget spreadsheets on Dad's desk growing up, line items labeled miscellaneous expenses or special funds. Michael had existed as a number in our family finances my entire life, and none of us had known. The money that could have gone to our college funds or family vacations or literally anything else had been quietly supporting a child Dad had fathered with someone else. Grace asked if Dad had a relationship with Michael. Mum said minimal. He'd met him a handful of times over the years, always when he was supposedly traveling for work. Birthday visits mostly, sometimes holidays. Dad had photos apparently, kept in a box in his office that Mum admitted she'd already removed from the house before we'd gone through his things. The entitlement of that decision alone was staggering. She'd erased evidence of Michael's existence even as she sat there, claiming the secret was for our protection. Colin stood up and walked out, just left the attorney's office without saying anything. Grace followed him. I sat there with Mom and Mr. Harrison and tried to process that my entire childhood had been built on a lie. Mom tried to explain her reasoning. She'd made a choice to keep her marriage together, to keep our family intact. Telling us would have only caused pain. Michael was being raised by his mother. He had his own life. There was no reason to complicate ours with information we didn't need. She spoke about it like it was this noble sacrifice, staying with a man who cheated and fathered a child with someone else, rather than what it actually was, which was complicity in a massive deception. Michael came to the funeral. We didn't know who he was at the time. He'd sat in the back, this young guy we'd never seen before who looked uncomfortable and sad. Afterward, he'd introduced himself to Mom, who'd hugged him briefly and then he'd left. Now I understood that interaction, the way Mom had tensed when she saw him, the way she'd kept that conversation away from the rest of us. Mr. Harrison suggested we might want to meet Michael formally, that perhaps understanding his perspective would help. The idea made me physically ill. This wasn't Michael's fault, rationally I knew that, but the thought of sitting down with this stranger who represented everything false about my parents' marriage was too much. We did meet him eventually. At a coffee shop a week later, all four of us kids with no parents present. Michael was nervous, polite, clearly grieving for a father he'd barely known. He'd grown up knowing about us, seeing photos, understanding he had half-siblings who didn't know he existed. His mother had told him the truth when he was young. He'd spent his whole life as a secret while we'd lived in ignorant bliss. He talked about the handful of times Dad had visited, birthdays when he was little, a couple of graduations, one Thanksgiving when we'd been told Dad was working. Michael had craved more contact, had wanted to know his father and his siblings, but had been told repeatedly that wasn't possible. Our family came first. He was the consequence that had to be managed quietly. I tried to feel compassion for him. I really did. But every time I looked at him, I saw my dad's betrayal and my mum's lies. I saw 23 years of deception. I saw evidence that the family I'd believed in had never actually existed. The resentment was visceral and unfair, and I couldn't shake it. Grace made more effort than Colin or I did. She exchanged numbers with Michael, met him for lunch a few times. She said he was nice, that he was hurting too, that none of this was his choice. But even she admitted the relationship felt forced and painful. How do you build a sibling bond with someone whose existence undermines your entire childhood? But that wasn't even the worst part. When we got into the actual division of assets, things became truly ugly. The house had to be sold because Mum couldn't buy out all 4 shares. Dad's retirement accounts were split 4 ways instead of 3. Family heirlooms we'd expected to inherit were now subject to negotiation with someone who'd barely known Dad. Michael tried to be reasonable about it, said he didn't want to cause problems, but his mother pushed for his full share. Legally, he was entitled to it. The will was clear. Dad had made Michael equal to the rest of us in death, even if he'd kept him secret in life. The estate settlement took 8 months. 8 months of lawyers and negotiations and painful family meetings. Mom defended her choice to keep the secret at every turn, said she'd done what she thought was best, that she'd protected her marriage and her children. Grace argued that we deserved the truth. Colin barely spoke to anyone throughout the process. I swung between rage at my parents and guilt about resenting Michael. We sold the house where I'd grown up, divided the proceeds 4 ways, split Dad's possessions among people who had completely different relationships with him. Michael got Dad's watch, something I'd assumed would come to me as the middle son. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Everything mattered in ways that felt petty and overwhelming. Mum moved into a condo. She's on speaking terms with Grace and me, barely speaks to Colin, who's still furious about the deception. She maintains she did the right thing, that keeping the secret was an act of love. I don't know how to reconcile that logic with the destruction it caused. Michael and I text occasionally. Superficial stuff, nothing deep. He sent a Christmas card last year. I didn't send one back. Grace sees him maybe twice a year. Colin refuses all contact. We're siblings by blood but strangers by experience, connected only by a father who couldn't figure out how to make room for all of us honestly. The worst part is knowing my parents' entire marriage was performance. Mum had spent 2 decades pretending she had a faithful husband, when really she was helping manage his second family. Dad had died believing the secret was still safe, that we'd never have to know. The trust that got broken wasn't just in them as individuals, but in the concept of family itself. I have a half-brother I barely know, parents whose marriage was built on carefully maintained lies, and memories of a childhood that feels completely different now that I understand what was happening behind the scenes. The inheritance got split, the family got fractured, and the secret that was supposedly kept to protect us ended up destroying us anyway. From family secrets to workplace deception, get ready for the story of how one lie destroyed an entire company culture. I'd been working at the company for about 4 years when bonus season rolled around. Everyone was anticipating it because we'd had a record-breaking year. Sales were up, major contracts had been signed, and morale was actually pretty good for once. Then Martin, our department head, called an all-hands meeting and delivered the bad news. No bonuses this year. Corporate had made budget cuts across the board, and unfortunately our department was affected. People were disappointed but understanding. Times are tough, budgets are tight, we get it. Except something felt off about the way Martin delivered that news. He seemed uncomfortable, kept avoiding eye contact, rushed through the announcement and left before anyone could ask questions. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe he just felt bad being the messenger of disappointing news. But the feeling nagged at me. About a week later, I was in the conference room setting up for a presentation. Martin had used the room earlier that morning and apparently forgotten to log out of his email on the shared computer. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was literally just moving the mouse to wake up the screen when his inbox appeared, and right there at the top was an email from corporate with the subject line about annual bonus distribution. I should have just logged him out and moved on, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the email. It showed that our department had absolutely received the full bonus pool. Every dollar that was supposed to go to our team had been allocated and sent to Martin for distribution, but instead of distributing it to everyone, he'd kept the majority for himself and split the rest between two senior managers who reported directly to him. The rest of us got nothing. I stared at that screen for a solid minute trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't a budget cut. This wasn't corporate making tough decisions. This was theft. Martin had lied to an entire team of people and pocketed money that was meant for all of us. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the email. Then I logged him out and tried to act normal for the rest of the day, even though I felt sick. I sent the photo to HR that night from a burner email account. Didn't include my name, didn't add commentary, just the photo with a subject line that said you should look into this. I figured they'd investigate quietly, maybe handle it internally, and we'd all get our bonuses eventually. I had no idea what I was about to set in motion. HR launched a formal investigation within 2 days. Martin got called into meetings. The two senior managers got called in. People started asking questions, and that's when Martin panicked. He started deleting emails frantically, going through old records, altering financial documents. It told me later that he'd requested access to archive files he'd never touched before, claiming he needed them for a project. He was trying to cover his tracks and doing it badly. Then came the breaking point. Martin called another all-hands meeting and told us that someone was spreading false rumors about bonuses, that whoever it was would be fired immediately if discovered, that discussing bonuses or bonus allocation with anyone, including HR, was now prohibited and would be considered insubordination. The threat was clear. Keep your mouth shut or lose your job. People were scared. A few colleagues came to me privately asking if I knew what was going on. I played dumb but told them to document everything, save emails, keep records. I had a feeling this was going to get worse before it got better. Forensics got involved about a week into the investigation. Once they started digging, they recovered everything Martin had deleted. Every email, every altered document, every attempt to hide what he'd done. And here's where it gets absurd. The investigation didn't just find evidence of this year's bonus theft. It uncovered years of embezzlement. Martin had been skimming from department budgets, redirecting funds, creating fake vendor accounts, and paying himself. The two senior managers had been helping him in exchange for their cut. This had been going on for at least 3 years. The company brought in external auditors. Legal got involved. The scope of the fraud was staggering. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars over multiple years. Money that should have gone to team development, equipment upgrades, employee benefits, all of it had been systematically stolen by 3 people at the top of our department. Martin was fired immediately and escorted out by security. The 2 senior managers were terminated the same day. HR sent out a vague company-wide email about personnel changes and an ongoing investigation. Our entire department was in chaos. No leadership, no direction, just a bunch of confused employees trying to figure out what happened and whether we still had jobs. The company restructured our whole department, brought in new management from other divisions, promised transparency and accountability. But the damage was done. Half our team quit within 3 months. They couldn't trust the new leadership, couldn't believe the company had let this happen for years without catching it, couldn't shake the feeling that if it happened once, it could happen again. I kept my head down for a while. The investigation was ongoing and I didn't want to draw attention to myself. But eventually HR tracked the anonymous email back to the conference room computer based on the timestamp of when the photo was taken. They reviewed security footage and saw me in there alone that morning. They called me in and asked point blank if I was the whistleblower. I admitted it. showed them the original photo on my phone, explained exactly what I'd seen and why I'd reported it. They thanked me for coming forward and mentioned something about a whistleblower settlement. I honestly hadn't even thought about money. I just wanted people to know the truth. The company offered me a settlement to avoid any potential retaliation claims. It wasn't huge, but it was substantial, enough that I could afford to leave and take some time to figure out what I wanted to do next. Because staying wasn't an option anymore. The culture was toxic. People were divided into camps of those who blamed me for destroying the department and those who thought I'd done the right thing. It was exhausting being at the center of that. Martin's facing felony charges now. Embezzlement, fraud, wire fraud. The prosecutors threw everything at him. His lawyer's trying to negotiate a plea deal, but it's not looking good. The two senior managers took plea deals and are cooperating with prosecutors. They'll probably do minimal jail time in exchange for testifying against Martin. I left the company about 6 months after everything went down. Used the settlement to go back to school, get some certifications, reset my career. But I still get LinkedIn messages from former colleagues asking if it was worth it. Was destroying the whole department worth exposing one person's fraud? The question bothers me because it implies I destroyed anything. Martin destroyed it. His fraud destroyed it. His cover-up destroyed it. I just exposed what was already rotten. Some people get it. They thank me for having the courage to speak up. Others blame me for not handling it differently, for not going to Martin directly, for not giving him a chance to make it right. As if a man who'd been stealing for years would suddenly develop a conscience because I asked nicely. The company's culture never really recovered. I keep in touch with a few people who are still there, and they say it's better than it was, but still weird. There's this underlying paranoia now, this sense that leadership might be lying about anything. Trust, once broken that thoroughly, doesn't really come back. I don't regret what I did. Those bonuses were our money. We'd earned them. Martin had no right to steal them, and every person who worked hard that year deserved to know the truth. But I'd be lying if I said there weren't consequences I didn't anticipate. I thought exposing fraud would be straightforward. Bad guy gets caught, good guys win, everyone moves on. Instead, it was messy and complicated, and it cost me relationships and a job I'd actually liked before all this happened. Martin's trial is coming up soon. I'll probably have to testify, face him in court and explain what I saw and why I reported it. Part of me dreads it, but another part of me wants him to hear directly from me that what he did was wrong and that his lies hurt real people who trusted him. The whole experience taught me that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good and doesn't always lead to happy endings. Sometimes it just leads to chaos and fallout and people asking if it was worth it. But the alternative was letting Martin keep stealing, keep lying, keep betraying everyone who worked for him. And that wasn't acceptable either. Corporate fraud is devastating, but personal fraud hits different, especially when it's family doing the stealing. I found out my credit was destroyed when I tried to get a car loan. The dealership finance guy looked at my application, looked at his computer screen, then looked at me like I'd just asked him to approve a loan for a wanted criminal. He said my credit score was in the low 500s and I had 7 maxed out credit cards in collections. I told him that was impossible. I didn't have 7 credit cards. I had 2, both paid off monthly, never missed a payment in my life. He showed me the screen. There they were. Cards from stores I'd never shopped at, banks I'd never heard of, all opened over the past 2 years, all maxed out, all sent to collections for non-payment. Thousands of dollars in debt that I absolutely had not accumulated. My first thought was some kind of data breach or random identity theft. My second thought, the one that made my stomach sink, was that this felt personal, too organized, too deliberate. I filed a police report and started the identity theft investigation process with the credit bureaus. It took weeks of phone calls, affidavits, paperwork, proving I hadn't opened these accounts. The fraud department at one of the banks was actually helpful and sent me copies of the original applications. That's when I saw the signatures. They were attempts at my signature, pretty decent forgeries actually, but not quite right, and the address listed on several applications was my old apartment, the one I'd lived in 3 years ago. Only a handful of people knew that address, family, mostly. I started going through the list in my head, trying to figure out who would have both my social security number and enough information about my history to pull this off. Then I looked closer at one of the applications and saw a phone number listed as a secondary contact. I recognized it immediately. It was my cousin Brandon's number. I called him, asked if we could meet up for coffee, said I needed to talk to him about something important. He agreed easily, probably thought I wanted to catch up. We met at this place near his apartment and I laid out everything I'd found. The credit cards, the forged applications, his phone number on the paperwork. I watched his face go through several emotions: surprise, guilt, then this weird defiance. He actually tried to justify it. Said he'd been in a tough spot, financially, that he'd only borrowed my identity temporarily and was planning to pay everything back before I ever found out. He said it like taking out credit cards in someone else's name and destroying their financial future was just a casual favor between cousins. The level of entitlement was genuinely staggering. I asked him how much he owed. He got vague, said he wasn't sure exactly. Maybe 15 or 20,000 across all the cards. I told him my credit report showed closer to 35,000. He looked genuinely surprised, like he'd lost track of how much fraud he'd committed. He promised he'd start making payments, get everything sorted out, asked me not to involve the police because it would ruin his life. I told him he had 1 week to come up with a payment plan and proof he could actually execute it. He agreed. That week came and went. No payment plan, no contact. He was avoiding my calls, so I stopped asking nicely. I already had documentation of everything: the forged applications, the purchases made on the cards that I could prove I didn't make because I was in a different state or had alibis. And I had our text conversations where he'd admitted to using my information, where he'd promised to pay everything back. He'd basically confessed in writing. I reported everything to the police with a formal complaint, filed reports with all the credit bureaus, started the long process of disputing every fraudulent account. But I also did something else, something probably petty but extremely satisfying. I used Brandon's own scam playbook against him. I gathered all the evidence of his fraud: screenshots, police reports, bank statements, everything. Then I sent carefully worded emails to 3 important people in his life: his employer, his girlfriend, and his landlord. I didn't editorialize, I didn't add dramatic flair. I just presented the facts. Brandon had committed identity theft. He had destroyed a family member's credit for personal gain. He was currently under investigation for fraud. Here's the documentation. His employer fired him within 2 days. He worked for a financial services company, and having an employee under investigation for fraud was apparently not something they were willing to tolerate. Immediate termination for dishonesty violations and bringing disrepute to the company. His girlfriend left him about a week later. She called me actually, asked if what I'd sent her was true. I confirmed everything. She said she'd been wondering where he was getting money for his lifestyle, since his salary didn't match his spending. Now she knew. She'd been dating someone funding his life with stolen credit. She moved out of their shared apartment that weekend. Then came the eviction notice. His landlord didn't want a tenant who was potentially going to jail for fraud and definitely couldn't pay rent now that he'd lost his job. Gave him 30 days to vacate. Brandon lost everything in about 2 weeks, and he blamed me for all of it. He actually threatened to sue me for defamation, claimed I'd ruined his reputation with lies. I laughed, genuinely laughed, and told him to talk to my lawyer. Then I showed him the police report with his name on it as the perpetrator of identity theft. Asked him how he planned to prove defamation when everything I'd shared was documented fact. He didn't have an answer. His lawyer, when he finally got one, apparently advised him that suing me was the stupidest possible move and he should focus on his criminal case instead. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence: my testimony, the forged documents, the text message confessions, bank records showing the purchases. Brandon's lawyer negotiated a plea deal: plead guilty to identity theft and fraud, avoid jail time in exchange for restitution and probation. Brandon took the deal. He's currently paying back the $35,000 he stole, plus penalties and fees, on a payment plan that'll take him years to complete. He's also on probation, has a criminal record, and is functionally unemployable in any field that requires a background check. Last I heard, he's living with his parents at 34 years old. His mum called me once crying, asking if there was any way I could drop the charges or forgive the debt. I told her that ship had sailed when Brandon decided to destroy my credit for 2 years and only stopped because he got caught, not because he felt guilty. She said I was being cruel. I said her son committed a felony against family and she should be having this conversation with him, not me. My credit's recovering slowly. I've gotten most of the fraudulent accounts removed from my report. My score's climbing back up month by month. It'll take time to fully repair the damage, but at least it's moving in the right direction. Brandon, on the other hand, is apparently bitter and broken. According to family gossip, he talks about how I ruined his life, how I should have just let him pay it back, how I'm vindictive and cruel. The lack of accountability is almost impressive. He committed identity theft, destroyed my financial credibility, and somehow I'm the villain in his version of events because I reported his crime and made sure the people in his life knew what kind of person he was. The mental gymnastics required to maintain that perspective are genuinely Olympic level. Family gatherings are awkward now. Some relatives think I went too far by contacting his employer and girlfriend. Others think I should have pressed for jail time instead of accepting the restitution deal. My parents support me but wish the whole thing had never happened. Brandon's parents don't speak to me at all. I don't regret any of it. Brandon made choices. He chose to steal my identity. He chose to max out credit cards in my name. He chose to lie about paying it back. And when consequences arrived for those choices, he chose to play victim instead of taking responsibility. Every bad thing that happened to him was a direct result of his own actions. I just made sure those actions had appropriate consequences. People ask if I feel bad about destroying his life. I don't. He destroyed his own life. I just documented it and made sure the right people knew the truth. There's a difference between revenge and accountability. Revenge would have been excessive, disproportionate, cruel for the sake of cruelty. What I did was hold him accountable using the same systems he'd tried to exploit. He wanted to use documentation and official channels to commit fraud. I used documentation and official channels to expose it. My credit will recover fully eventually. Brandon's reputation probably won't, and that feels exactly as fair as it should. Revenge served cold tastes sweet, but discovering you're not actually invited to your own partner's wedding hits different. I was looking for stamps in Jen's desk drawer. Simple, mundane task. We'd been living together for 8 months, dating for 2 years total, and I'd grabbed stamps from that drawer dozens of times before. But this time, tucked under a stack of old utility bills, I found an envelope that stopped me cold. Thick, expensive cardstock with elegant calligraphy on the front. The kind of envelope you use for something important. I pulled it out and opened it before my brain could tell me not to. Inside was a wedding invitation. A beautiful, professionally designed wedding invitation with gold embossing and delicate floral borders. For Jen's wedding, to someone named Christopher. The date was 3 months away, late spring, at a vineyard I'd never heard her mention. There was a registry link, a custom wedding website URL, details about hotel room blocks for out-of-town guests. My name appeared nowhere, not on the invitation, not as a +1, not even as someone who might exist in Jen's life. I read it 3 times trying to make it make sense. Some kind of joke, maybe. A save the date for someone else's wedding she was keeping for reference. But no, it clearly said Jennifer Marie Torres and Christopher Allen Beck request the honor of your presence at their wedding. I was still standing there holding this invitation when Jen came home from work. She walked into the bedroom, saw me, saw what I was holding, and her face went completely white, then red. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I asked who Christopher was. My voice sounded surprisingly calm, considering my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the cardstock. She didn't try to lie. Maybe she knew there was no point. She sat down on the edge of the bed and admitted she'd been engaged to Christopher for a year. They'd dated before she and I got together, broke up, but reconnected about a year into our relationship. She'd been maintaining full relationships with both of us, keeping us in completely separate parts of her life. Christopher thought she lived alone. I thought we were building a future together. Neither of us had any idea the other existed. I asked why. Why stay with me if she was planning to marry someone else? Why not just break up? She said she'd been planning to end things with me after finding the right moment, but she kept postponing it. She had reasons, excuses that tumbled out one after another. She was afraid of hurting me. She didn't know how to do it. She thought maybe she could keep both relationships going until she figured out what she really wanted. The justifications were almost more insulting than the betrayal itself. I asked if Christopher knew about me. She shook her head, said he had no idea. She'd been living two completely separate lives for a year, somehow managing to keep all the details straight, all the lies organized. The logistical achievement was honestly staggering. The emotional devastation it caused was worse. The RSVP card was still in the envelope. I picked it up and saw there was a phone number listed for questions. I called it right there in front of her. Jen tried to grab my phone, but I stepped away. A man answered after 3 rings. I asked if this was Christopher. He said yes, sounded friendly, probably thought I was a wedding guest with a question about the venue or the schedule. I introduced myself as Jen's partner of 2 years, said we'd been living together for 8 months, and I'd just found the wedding invitation in her desk. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say anything for what felt like forever. Then he asked if Jen was there. I said yes. He said he'd call her back and hung up. Jen's phone started ringing immediately. She looked at the screen, looked at me, and didn't answer. It rang again and again. She finally turned it off completely. I told her I was leaving and she should figure out which relationship she actually wanted, because she couldn't have both. I packed a bag and went to my friend's apartment for the night. Christopher called me the next morning. My number must have been in Jen's phone somewhere, or maybe she'd finally answered his calls and given it to him. He asked if we could meet. Just the two of us. No Jen. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our respective apartments. He looked as wrecked as I felt. Turned out Jen had told him elaborate lies about where she was when she was actually with me. Business trips that were actually weekends at our apartment. Family obligations that were actually date nights. She constructed entire fictional narratives for both of us. We spent 2 hours comparing notes. The details she'd told each of us about her life, her job, her family. Some things were consistent. A lot wasn't. She'd told him her parents were deceased. They're very much alive, and I'd had dinner with them multiple times. She'd told me she hated camping. She and Christopher apparently went on camping trips regularly. It was like we'd been dating completely different people. Christopher said he'd already called off the wedding, contacted the venue, cancelled everything, told his family the engagement was over. He seemed embarrassed about the whole thing, like he should have somehow known she was lying. I felt the same way, like there must have been signs we both missed, red flags we'd ignored because we trusted her. We both ended it with Jen that week. Christopher sent her a text saying they were done and blocked her number. I went back to the apartment when I knew she'd be at work, packed up all my stuff, and left my key on the counter. She tried to call me dozens of times, left voicemails crying, apologizing, begging me to let her explain. I deleted them without listening all the way through. Then came the breaking point. About a week after everything fell apart, I got a call from Jen's sister, someone I'd met a few times at family dinners. She was crying, said she couldn't believe what Jen had done, asked if I was okay. During that conversation, she mentioned that Jen had moved, just packed up and left town entirely, moved to another state to escape the embarrassment. Apparently, once people in her social circle found out what happened, once mutual friends and family members learned she'd been engaged to one guy while living with another, she couldn't handle facing anyone. Her sister said Jen was devastated and humiliated. Part of me felt bad for her, a very small part, but mostly I just felt relieved that she was gone and I didn't have to worry about running into her at the grocery store or seeing her car parked somewhere unexpected. Christopher and I got drinks once, maybe 2 weeks after everything came out. It was this strange bonding experience, both of us processing the same betrayal from different angles. We joked darkly about starting a support group for people whose partners maintained secret double lives, but the friendship felt too weird to continue. We were connected by trauma, not genuine compatibility. We texted occasionally for a few months, then gradually stopped. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, he's dating someone new and doing well. I'm doing okay too. Better than okay, actually. I'm dating again, though I'm definitely more cautious now, more aware of inconsistencies in stories, more willing to ask questions when something feels off. And I always check desk drawers. Every time I'm at someone's place and they ask me to grab something from a drawer or a bag, I'm hyper aware of what else might be in there. Wedding invitations, secret phones, evidence of other lives being lived in parallel to the one I'm seeing. People ask if there were signs I missed with Jen. Looking back, maybe. She was protective of her phone. She had work trips that seemed frequent but vague. There were occasional weekends where she'd say she needed alone time and would stay at a friend's place. At the time, I thought she was independent and valued her space. Now, I know she was probably with Christopher, but I don't blame myself for not catching it sooner. Jen was a good liar. She'd had practice. She'd constructed elaborate systems to keep her two lives separate. That's not something a normal person anticipates or looks for in a partner. You don't start a relationship assuming the person you're falling for is also planning a wedding with someone else. The wedding date came and went. I thought about it that day, wondered what Jen was doing, if she felt any regret. I didn't reach out, didn't check her social media, which I'd blocked months earlier. Just acknowledged the date and moved on with my life. Christopher sent me a text that day. Just said thinking about what could have been today, glad we both dodged that bullet. I appreciated it. We didn't need to be friends, but it was nice to know someone else understood exactly how strange and painful this whole situation had been. I learned a lot from the Jen situation, about trust, about paying attention to inconsistencies, about the importance of actually knowing the person you're building a life with. But mostly I learned that some people are capable of maintaining lies so elaborate that you never see them coming. And when those lies finally collapse, the fallout is absolute. I'm more careful now, not paranoid, just aware. I ask more questions, I pay attention to details. I don't ignore red flags because I want the relationship to work. And I definitely always check desk drawers. And that wraps up tonight's collection of secrets, lies, and moments when reality came crashing down harder than anyone expected. If you've made it this far through all this chaos, you're officially part of the drama-loving family. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the next batch of Reddit stories that'll keep you up at night. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, the truth always finds a way out, usually at the worst possible moment. See you in the next one.